Someone's going to go for 2 and get it at some point.
It's 1:42 in the morning.
Yeah, that's all right. Number 1. Shocker. Iron.
Man, give me the Trojans.
There we go.
Commit to Overtime, presented by Perfection One. Along with John Bruce, my name is Dewey Dailey, as we welcome you into this week's show, episode 56, here on the podcast. A lot of work for us last week down at the Waller Gymnasium at Shawnee State University. A 12-game slate over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. 7 on Saturday, 5 on Sunday. Of course, you can find all of those archived on the YouTube channel. But I feel like for us, that kind of overshadowed a lot of other big games around the area. We'll talk about some of those today. But it should be a fun episode. And this week, a lot less work for us than going back to last week. We had a lot of help, obviously, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But overall, it was a very fun and I'd say a very successful weekend down at Shawnee.
Yeah, I think so too. Like you said, it's going to be a little bit less work for us this week, but we're going to talk about every one of those games, but you can watch all of those games back on our YouTube channel, which obviously you're watching it here.
Right.
But you can find all of those games. We'll talk about some of the highlights in those games as well. But for the out of conference or maybe the blowouts, those are going to be kind of a shortened review. But let's say the Minford Hillary Davidson game, which was an instant classic, Fairland Eastern Brown boys as well, and then really the last one last night, South.
No, it was fairly. It was interesting that like a large majority of the good games, probably all of the good games, were between two teams from our coverage area.
Mhm.
Now there were a couple that I think every game that I would consider to have been like solid had at least one Southeast District team. So I
Mhm.
think that's a good thing for the district.
Yeah, now maybe the highest
True. I know where you're
skill
going.
level one
Yeah.
was 2 teams from outside, but it was also, besides the last, 45
But you
seconds,
got to
was an
remember
awful game.
that's also a state champion out of what was
Yeah.
Division II and a top team out of a different state. So.
Yeah, so like that part was good, but I was a little disappointed with the team from Ohio in that one. So we'll slightly mention that one, but we'll talk more in depth about our teams. I thought our teams did well. I was
Yep.
impressed with Wheelersburg, especially after they had lost to Eastern Pike, which I'm going to go see Eastern Pike, I guess, tonight now on Tuesday. So when they face Portsmouth West,
That's an interesting matchup.
I want to get eyes. Portsmouth West has got off to a really nice start, so I want to get eyes on them. And if Eastern beat that Wheelersburg team that outside of a few minutes in that second quarter really hung with Harvest Prep for most of that game, so I'm interested to see them, and I think we are well on pace to pass our number of live streams that we did last year, which we worked super hard last year too. So
Right.
it was a good start. We'll talk about those games, but we'll get way more in depth over some of those other games. And really, if you are a fan of girls basketball in the area, don't even worry about Buckeye football on Saturday, because Saturday might be the best day of girls basketball as far as matchups go, which we'll talk about 3 of them. We'll preview 3 of those games. Should be a really fun week for boys and girls basketball.
So we'll go ahead and jump into the weekly headlines. I believe we have 2 we're going to go over. Obviously, the second one going to be a little bit longer than the first one. But the first headline we're going to talk about, and this one obviously a little bit delayed, but since we only do these on Mondays, if something happens Tuesday, we got to wait 6 days for it to go over it. So we're talking about Fairland head coach Nathan Speed, now the all-time leader in wins at Fairland. I believe he's now 323 and 108. I don't know that to be for sure, but
It's a very,
regardless,
very good win percentage.
regardless, Coach Speed now at 323 career wins, the all-time leader in coaching wins at Fairland. Great career so far, and Fairland off to a great start this year.
Yeah, and just throwing it out there, he's like 14 in front of Coach Buchanan, which means Coach Speed's got
Yeah.
to keep winning, because Coach Buchanan's got to be coming up quick on his heels because of that. But yeah, they've got off to a really good start, and I don't know if people expected it so much because of how much they lost from last season. So if you look at a 4-0 start, you can go back and you can watch 2 of those performances. A really impressive win over a very good North Adams team over in Seaman. That one's back in our archives here, and then also the 46-44 win over Eastern Brown in the Battle of the 740, which was a dynamite
Yeah.
game. Yeah, so
So he's 323 and 108. And I would have to look at how many games Fairland has played since that graphic was put out. But Buchanan in third right now.
yeah, which he'll be in second by the end of the season because I think 13 more wins, he should be able to catch up. Was it Carl York? Was that the
Yes.
yeah, so, for
74.8 win percentage
yeah,
for
and it's
head
not like
coach
Carl
Speed.
York was
No,
some
no.
scrub with a 699 win percentage too. So Fairland has had an outstanding basketball tradition. Coach Speed has done a great job over just going back over the last 10 seasons, not even going back before that, but over the last 10 seasons, coming into this year, they had won 5 district titles, which I believe is at the top amongst schools in the Southeast District. Also won a regional championship. They're a regional runner-up, and then in the 2020 season, they had won their last game and would be playing in the Elite 8 if that would have, ever finished, but COVID. So, COVID ruined it for a lot of people, and including that Fairland team that made it to the Elite Eight. The next year, they made it back to the Elite Eight, but they fell to a Worthington Christian team that ultimately lost in the state championship game with, I think it was like 3 Division 1 athletes on their team. So we saw them that year and they were unreal. So for them to compete with them, it kind of made sense. But as we were saying, somewhat unexpected this year. Only returning the 2 starters. You do have your point guard and Brody Buchanan coming back and a really excellent athlete in Wayne Keegan Smith. But they've gotten some really good play from, obviously Buchanan. He's been a standout in both the games that we watched, 17 and a half points a game in those 2 games. But I mean, really, it felt like in the North Adams game, he could kind of score at will in that one. And then he, took over late when he needed to beat Eastern Brown. But Smith has been steady. Trevor Locko, I was impressed with what he was able to do in that second half in
Yep.
that Eastern Brown game. It seemed like he kind of forced the issue a little bit and came on. Also, at the end of the first quarter, if you're an opponent, don't let him shoot. As he's hit a buzzer beater in
Uh,
both games that we've done.
yep.
Cliff Cliff Franson wasn't as dead eye of a shooter down at Shawnee State, but had a really good game at North Adams, and you can tell that they are very confident in him as a shooter. And then Gabe Paulson, he had 10 the other night, really came alive in that Eastern Brown game when they needed him as well. So, you know, to me, the start is evident of how good of a coaching staff and program they have to where it's just kind of a next man up. You have people filling into new roles and thriving really immediately. You also had a kid like Maddox Goo that came off the bench, hit a big 3 for him
Yep.
the other night. It's players like that that are gonna come on and get better throughout the season, and that just shows what Coach Speed and his staff have put implemented down there at Fairland, what the kids have bought into, and then clearly those kids work really hard to be able to get Coach Speed a whole lot of wins.
No, I mean, it's a team that obviously fell a game shy of a district final appearance last season. They're in that really tough Ohio Valley Conference that, here early on doesn't seem to be changing, right? A team in South Point that we thought may be down a little bit. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. We talked about it earlier. We obviously mentioned Hanshaw coming back for them, but, I think it's pronounced Davon Lewis is
Mhm.
how they did it over the PA. But, he seems to be a really solid young player for Coach Travis Weiss. So really, it seems more of a reload year than a rebuild
Yeah, they've
year
got
for
some
them.
really good coaches in that league too, so
So yeah, I mean, and we saw it, right? Fairland went down there for I think their second or was it their first or second league game, and they only win by 2. I think it was their second because I think
yeah,
they played Cole Grove prior to
yes.
that. Which I mean, you got to go through Owen Johnson when you're playing against the Hornets. So it's a really tough conference, and I've only really been involved with covering that conference for 2 or 3 years now. So I would imagine for his entire tenure it's been like that. So I think that kind of speaks to his record a little bit, where it's like if maybe he was in a different league, he might be sitting at 350 wins. It
Right.
just the OVC as of late seems to be one of the tougher conferences around the area.
Well, you typically, with Chesapeake is always a good program. They have a really good coach over there now as well. So, with South Point the last few years has really came up with Coach Wise. Ironton typically is a strong program. Portsmouth historically is the best program ever in the Southeast District. So they came along last year, especially. They haven't been up as much the last few years, but I don't think they'll be down for very long. Colgrove, back-to-back seasons within, I think, the last 5 years, they won district titles. So it's a league that I think because Chesapeake and Fairland and then Ironton, we'll just use those three as an example, like kind of if you want to be competitive, you have to be better. And because of those, you know, high level programs, it's kind of lifted everyone else to a higher level. And that's not even mentioning Gallia Academy, who's been really good. Yeah.
Rock Hill's in there too. I mean, it's in some of those schools, they just have good athletes. I think
Mhm.
Ironton's the most evident of that, where they're just going to have good
Yeah.
athletes all the time. Now, it might hurt them when they have a Division 1 football player that's going to forgo, the winter of his senior season and not
Yeah.
play. But
Second time in the last 5 years where their best player
right,
well, one of their best players will not have played because he's going to go to school early, and you can never blame a kid for that.
right.
So,
All right, we can go ahead and move on to the second headline here on this week's show. It's going to be a longer one, but hopefully we can kind of rapid fire through it. We're going to go over the battle in the 740 this past weekend. Once again, it was a 12-game slate over last Saturday and Sunday. A lot of hands on deck for this one.
yeah. So, a big thank you first off, Jim Barry of Innovative Sports, his staff, trusting us to kind of step in and do these games our way. It was, we got a little extra help. Seth Pluta, his staff down at Shawnee State helped us set up.
Yep.
It was outstanding. Like we had both of those two, Seth and Jim, were checking on us constantly to make sure things were working. We had one little hiccup in our first game, and then we got it taken.
Got it.
Yeah, got it taken care of pretty quickly. And Tony Williams also very helpful down there. It was just for us it was easy down there. All we had to do, we got down there set up. We were able to keep everything logged in and everything because how Shawnee State is secure campus down there and just made it nice and easy for us. So all we had to do was get down there and call the games. That just makes things so much easier. Obviously, we did our research beforehand and everything to get more prepared, but it wasn't just those people that helped too. Kenneth Hay came down
Yep.
every night. He's
Yeah.
typically our cameraman, but he called 4 games. If you heard him from Sunday to Saturday, he clearly was getting better throughout too. Is just he had only done 1 game
Right,
before
and it was
and
last February,
yeah.
so it had been a long time.
Yeah, and then we also had Malachi Roselle, who's a student at South Webster, came over. He called the 2 girls games with me, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and like he hadn't done any basketball yet this season. He did a game down at the Convo last year, but you could tell from day 2 to day 1 he got better. And that's kind of one of the things we like to do is we like to give opportunities to try to grow because Dewey, it's not like he's old, but I mean, 22.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. When did you start? 19?
This is technically 18
Yeah.
still, but yeah.
So, like, we like to try to use people that are excited about it and want to get involved. And, Dewey's done a great job for us, but we also you got to have some arms in the bullpen.
Right.
So Carson Francis normally is. He was on a boys trip down to, got to watch that crazy Bengals game yesterday. So, to have those 2 to help, give Dewey a break, let him go run the camera a little bit because 12 games in 2 days is crazy. Like, for me, it was easy because all I had to do was just keep stats and just say what's going on
Yeah.
color-wise, but for those guys, they're calling literally every play of every game, and it's way more work, and I appreciate it greatly because it makes it to where all I gotta do is show up. Now,
Right.
I kinda have to run the computer sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a big step forward for me in
Running the
my old age.
computer's a lot easier than it used to be though,
Yeah.
with our, our
You
OCR
should have
stuff
said it
and
was harder. Yeah. But, yeah, it's something that, we enjoy doing it and, having the opportunity really meant a lot to us. So we appreciate what Jim trusting us, Seth and his staff as well. Also, really, even though they didn't write this weekend, Derek Webb and Brock Nair came down and did the interviews for the MVPs, and that made it to where with the games. So if you were down there, there was I think 16 minutes was like the most in between games.
yeah.
So they are like going in a hurry. So Dewey's turning over the logos and getting our stuff ready for the next game. I'm starting to get my paperwork ready. I don't know if we have time to do the MVP stuff. So it's a big help for Derek and Brock to come down and help us in that way, even though, I think there were times they'd probably rather been elsewhere since they weren't fully working, but
Right.
it was really helpful for them. On the weekend, over the 12 games, we averaged over 815 views per game, which says a lot because, like you mentioned, some of those games didn't feature teams around our area in our coverage area at all. Some of them only featured one of our teams, and overall, we got some nice viewers. We really appreciate that. I'm sure our sponsors appreciate it. We appreciate all the sponsors as always.
Yep.
And also we gained 70 new subscribers. So if you've accidentally clicked on this and you're watching it here, we appreciate it. We hopefully you stick around with us each time that we do overtime presented by Perfection One, whether we're in studio, either the studio downtown studio, Studio 33, or possibly somewhere else coming up after the new year. So we appreciate you joining us overall over the weekend. And if you haven't watched one of the games and you hear something we say and you want to go back and watch, they're all right there in our do we have a playlist, right? I think
For
there's
what? The
the
battle?
battle.
Yep, there's a separate playlist for all of the battle and the 740
Yeah,
games.
but if you also just go to the live link, you can see all of them, and then you can see the interviews as well. They posted the interviews up, and those are on the videos portion since it was not live. So those are good. There's a couple of the kids from out of the area that were really good too.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I think it was Xander Carter was really good from Ashland, and like there's a reason why he's going to go probably be a star at Liberty. So yeah, it was fun.
You wanna
Yes.
jump into these game recaps? We got
Yeah.
12
So
of them to go over here.
yeah, 12 games, not all close. I think all of them
Yeah.
had at least one standout performance, sometimes more than one. We'll at least highlight at least one in those and then possibly more. You want to start?
Yeah, I can get
Yeah,
it
you
going.
called you called the first one,
I did.
so
So we'll go every other one since
okay.
I
That's
did.
kind of how we did it.
Yeah, I did every other game. So to kick things off, 11 a.m. on Saturday, game one of 12. It was Notre Dame and Patriot Prep. Miles Phillips had a big one. The Titan had 19 points and 7 rebounds. Notre Dame won by 21. I never felt like it was really that far apart.
Right.
It was a lot closer during the game. But nonetheless, Notre Dame still undefeated on the season after their 63-41 win over the Eagles. 3-0 in the year.
Yeah, maybe it also we didn't notice it pulling apart because that's when we were trying to figure out the
That is
the,
true.
the
Yeah,
camera part.
the like was I think we got it on before the game ended.
Yes.
It was very late, but for a large majority of the fourth quarter, our camera kind of started bugging out.
Mhm.
Luckily, that was the only time over the whole showcase it happened. So I guess maybe the first game was the best one for that to happen. Because
It
it gave us time to recover for the next 11.
Yeah, it was one adjustment we had to make, but Landon Barberitz was good. Aaron Bradford, I thought Zionberger gave some good minutes. Brady Davis,
Davis knocked down a few threes
yeah, I
too.
like the makeup of that Notre Dame team. I know they lost a couple players to transfer, but it didn't really appear to affect them in any way. So I look for them to make a nice little run so far or later on this year. So that was game one. Game two featured two teams in the Southeast District, topped out by Manchester's Parker Hayslip, who was outstanding. Was all over the court. I was kinda hoping they would put up the stats up on the Shack website, but it wasn't up yet. The Greyhounds were 52-40 winners over Piketon. I wasn't sure how they were gonna deal with Big Bo Henry, held him to 9 points. Luke Gullion had 10 for Piketon, but on the day for the Greyhounds, it was Parker Hayslip. He had 21 points. Just it felt like he had a hand on so many passes, got the
Hmm.
passing lane, got a lot of deflections. He was outstanding the entire game. Braylon Rickett had a nice game for them as well with 11. Elijah Crabtree hit a couple big threes for him as well. So that Manchester team, you picked them early in the season. They
Yeah.
haven't got off to a great start, but like what I saw out of them, I really liked because what Hayslip can do is really going to make a lot of teams uncomfortable throughout the year.
Yep.
Are you gonna check to see if that stuff was updated
No,
yet?
well, I was more so gonna check out their schedule. I can check out their stats as well. So they only have 4 games up.
Well, that's a different team.
Oh, my fault. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
Fayetteville.
sometimes you click on the wrong
That
thing
is
on
not
there.
Manchester. So they
Yeah.
have 5 games up. So through five, Hayslip averaging around 15 and a half points per game. the clear leader. I mean, when you look at the stats in the entire league, Hayslip is tied for fourth in points per game. So he's obviously, a force in that conference. Manchester, I believe, is a Division 7 team. So I think Manchester, maybe a sneaky team to make some noise in the
Mhm.
tournament. Obviously, that's far ways away, and I'm still kind of looking for them to make some noise in the Shack too. So
Yeah,
we'll see a little bit more out of
that's a
Manchester in the
big
next couple weeks.
it's a big South Webster division, so you kinda wanna
Yeah.
avoid them, but
South Webster, Fairfield,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's
But I
I
mean,
feel like Division 7's very good. Like,
well,
maybe
I'll read some of these names to you, and I mean, I'll let you decide if you. And I'm telling you, we're gonna do a convo or con no segment next week.
yeah, when we have less than
But
12
I'll
games to
just
talk
read
about.
these teams off, and you'll just let me know, right? So, 14 schools, 2 district champs. So
Okay.
obviously, 4 teams will make the district,
Yeah,
or will make the
the
convo.
convo.
Um,
Yeah, so, we say that because it's just district championships this year at the
right?
convo.
Yeah, yeah. So I
There's gonna be a
believe,
bunch of them.
yeah, Division 7 and the district semis are at Waverly. So Fairfield, New Boston, Green, Manchester, Miller, Notre Dame, Sudaville East, South Gallia, South Webster, Southern, St. Joe, Trimble, Western, and White Oak.
Glad you didn't say Sims Valley. I thought you were gonna say Sims Valley in there because I assume there's 6.
Sims Valley is 6.
Okay. Because that would've just made it even tougher because it's gonna be hard to even get there because some of those teams and sometimes you hear all 14 teams, you get 2 out, but what you just listed off was some really talented teams, so
Mm.
it should be interesting to watch, so I'm excited, we still have at least 2 months of play until then.
We got a little bit,
Yeah.
which I think is why the convo con no segment could be a fun one because we could look back on it and be like, man, you picked them to go to the combo and they finished
You know,
500.
it would be
So
fun if we do it next week and then maybe ruin some people's Christmases.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there we go, that's
we'll
what you
pick
always
a
wanna do.
district champion to not even make it to the combo. That's what we'll do
Yeah.
because that's always fun. Um, quickly before we move on, Manchester does not play Fairfield, who I think, as of now, anybody that follows the Shack would deem Fairfield still probably at the top of that league. They don't play Fairfield until January 10th, so
Okay. Where's that one at?
that one is at Manchester.
Yeah.
So, we'll
That's
see.
so far
But
away.
we got
That's so far away.
yeah.
Like, it's like we can get to North Adams, and then it's a big county.
Yeah. All
But,
right, 10 more games to go over.
yeah, you just
Oh, you want me to go over the next one
yeah,
as well?
because we were going every other one,
Okay.
and you actually called this one, so
So this was Walnut Ridge and Huntington, West Virginia. So these are the
yes.
Highlanders and the Scots. Obviously, these are two out of area teams. Huntington, obviously, an out of state team.
Big British Isles game.
But Walnut Ridge picks up the win. Dion Johnson scoring 17 points along with 8 rebounds. That was a 12-point win, 59-47 for the Scots. So
Jaleel Wakil
there you go.
could shoot it as well. I thought Dare Adams as well. So, this is one of those where we're just gonna go over it pretty quick because of that, but I thought that one was a pretty entertaining game also, so,
It's a lot of.
I'll tell you
I'll
what.
say this in the nicest way. It was as similar as high school basketball could get to like, an AAU game, I feel.
Why? Because one team just had the worst administrative like, how do you get 2 administrative technicals in a game?
Oh, they got
They
two?
got 2. They got 1 because they didn't put someone in the book.
Pregame, that's why they got a
They
technical?
they got one in the pregame for dunking. They got one for not putting someone in the book
Yeah.
later, which is partially why Walnut Ridge won. But and then it was like, "Oh, like, why didn't they have it in the book?" Well, we had the roster.
Yeah, we
We
didn't
didn't
have
have
it
the
either.
player.
Yeah.
So, if the roster they sent in was used.
But we also didn't have a player later that the official book had, so I don't know. But
Yeah. But, yeah, that was
anyway, we can move on to the next one.
yeah, the next one, Fairfield Union over New Hope Christian, a 62-40 win, just absolutely dominated the glass. I gotta count this up again. I think it was 39-15. Fairfield Union just dominated the glass over the Statesmen, led by Keegan Arnett, 21 points and 13 rebounds. He was outstanding throughout the entire game. Asa Klein, I thought, looked really good as a freshman. Jackson Iser, Keaton Webb, Trevor Utzinger. It's a team that for Fairfield Union, it seems like they're just going to continue to get better throughout the year because they're fairly young. But the way they coach their big men is just to me really impressive because it they seemingly graduate 1 or 2 each year, and then they still are just as good. So Keegan Arnett with a monster game, like I said, 21 and 13, a dominating win over the Statesman.
The next one was probably in terms of, um, I don't know the word I want to use. In terms of pedigree, probably the
Mm.
biggest game on the slate. It was Ashland Blazer, the Tomcats taking on the Alter. What was Alter?
The
The King? Oh,
Knights.
the Knights. I was about to say the Kings, but Kettering Alter, right? So, Kettering Alter was the Division II state
Yep,
champ from
and they
last year.
dominated on their way to like, I don't think they had a game, like, within they might have had, like, 1 in the regional that was within 10, but the rest of them were just blowouts.
But it was Ashland Blazer on top. Final score was 66-60. Now, if you watched it live or were there in person, you would know the game was not quite that close. I believe Kettering Alter had about 7 points, 7 or 8 points in like 15 seconds. I mean, it was
Mm.
crazy. I mean, it was like a three, a steal, a three, a steal, and a layup, all in, like I said, about 15 or 20 seconds. That, after Blazer had taken everybody out, they actually had to sub their starters back in because it got so tight. But once again, Blazer ended up picking up the win. Xander Carter, one of the better performances of the showcase,
Yeah.
maybe the best performance of the showcase. 28 points for him. As you said, the future Liberty Flame. Bright career ahead for him.
Oh, man, he is a do-it-all type of guy. He won the tip. I think the second possession got a steal and a dunk. A few possessions later, they ran a backdoor action to get a lob to him. I clipped that. I don't know how you can see that. Like, can you, like, look through on YouTube
I
and
mean,
see
if
something
you
clipped?
click on the link that you send, it'll take you to that
Okay.
clip.
Yeah,
So
so it was a nice backdoor play to get a big lob, and he was guarding RJ Greer for Alder, who's gonna go to NC State. Held him to He ended up with 15, but it wasn't that close of a matchup. It was just an utter domination by Carter. I was really impressed. That Blazer team could really shoot the ball. They were really fun to watch. They averaged 81 points a game, only scored 66, but, like you said, it started to get closer late. A lot of that was Thomas Nicholas for Alder really caught fire at the end of that game, and you could just tell how frustrated Blazer was to have to put their starters back in, but when it got to, what, 6 within 15 seconds left, it was kind of a do or die moment for them at that point. So, that one to me was really high level if you wanna go back and watch it. Wasn't the most competitive, but it was a pretty fun game to watch overall. So, moving on, our next one was Fairland, the girls just utterly dominating, Ashland Blazers
yeah.
girls. Now, Blazer was down Kenley Woods, who's gonna go play at Eastern Kentucky. The good thing for Blazer was she warmed up a little bit at halftime, so it seems like she may not be that far off. But a couple years ago, we were at a game where we thought that Maya Hamilton was gonna play because she was warming up, and then she never
Yeah.
played. So
Yeah, it was that,
maybe,
Fairfield and North Adams
yeah.
district game at
Yeah.
Waverly.
So
That was a
maybe
good game.
yeah, so and after watching her play the last couple of years, like, they might have won that game if
Yeah.
so actually, they were up 10, weren't they?
Yeah,
Late.
both games that day, the, loser blew a second half 10-point lead.
Yep.
So, it's
Yeah,
very
so and
comebacky day.
yes, it was fun. I love being down at early. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and this one, a 68-28 win. Bailey Russell, 29 points. She is inching closer to the 1,000-point mark. I think she needs, like, 27, something like that. So, I would guess that she will get it maybe on Tuesday, but when they play Portsmouth, one of those 2. I think they'd probably like to try to get it before the Portsmouth game. But,
Yeah. They might treat
she
that one like a tournament 1,000 point
where it's just
thing.
like,
You just keep going.
yeah, they just keep going, and then, like, if there's a timeout, they do it. But, yeah, so I think with that being that big of a game, they probably wanna get it out of the way, and she can really flat out fill it up. Cameron Barnett's at 16. Addison Godby had another good game. I liked how Ava Lane did off the bench. She didn't really score, didn't really shoot the ball real well, but the energy she brought. Issa Telefaro, as always, just a solid player. Addison Cornell, first time getting to see her play. I thought she gave some good minutes. Taking Leap, some good minutes as well. So that one, especially the first half, I think is something you maybe want to tune in on. Second half was a little looser, but I thought Fairland in that first half was just a complete machine. They were up 41-10. like we said, Blazer is going to get better when their best player comes back, but at the same time, it's not fair if you're playing Fairland without being at full strength.
Right.
And honestly, to be fair, it's not really fair to play Fairland at full strength as
Yeah.
well. Now, maybe for Portsmouth it will be, but that's a game we will talk about later.
Yep. So the final game on Saturday, I'd say going into the tournament, probably or excuse me, going into the showcase, it was probably the game I was most excited for because I had two area teams that I feel like are held to a pretty high regard. It was Fairland and Eastern Brown. We were at that game over at the Kaiser
Yes,
Court last year, and an instant classic over in
Manchester,
whatever Eastern Brown is in. I can never figure it out,
Manchester or Macon. I don't know which one.
uh,
It's not
but
Sardinia.
but nonetheless, it was a three by Noah Markham last year that propelled the Dragons to, I believe, a 3-point win.
Hmm.
It was actually their first ever win against Eastern Brown in the history of the school. So going into Saturday night, they were 1-6 all time, so they haven't played all that much. It ended up being a 46-44 win for the Dragons. Brody Buchanan, a big night for the senior. 17 points in the win, had that big M1 layup down the stretch. I got a little bit excited, and then that was kind of what I was talking about earlier, where like you could tell I was a little straight, like I
Yeah,
was so exhausted from that point. I had been up since like 3:30 in the morning, and it
making
was
those donuts.
yeah, and it was like 9 p.m. at that point. So I'd been up for about 16 hours. So it had been a long day, but that one kind of got me out of my
But
chair a little
that's a good
bit.
way to finish the long
Yeah, that is
days.
true.
Yeah, makes it a little
But yeah,
easier.
it's a big win for Fairland, right? Kind of Eastern Brown put the. I'm gonna stop. I promise I'll stop making the joke after today. But Eastern Brown kind of put the transitive property joke to
Yeah.
bed in that one because you lose to a North Adams team by 20, and then North Adams turns around and loses to Fairland by 10. So you're thinking, well, can Eastern Brown really play with this Fairland team? And they led for a large majority of the
Mhm.
game, but Fairland, obviously ends up pulling away in the end. So.
Yeah, so it was with a little over 30 seconds left, Chase Pinkerton with a nice move inside to give Eastern the lead. Then they're denying Brady Buchanan the ball, but as soon as he got it, he just makes his big crossover around midcourt. I thought Carter Cluxton did a good job of getting his body there. I think he was a hair late. Ends up being a lot of contact on that play, and Buchanan with a beautiful finish. And then just seeing the passion he had afterwards, just I was pretty fired up at that time as well. So it was a great game. Like you said, it was
Yeah.
a great one to finish. Buchanan with 17 points, 4 assists on the day. Gabe Polson had 10. Pretty balanced besides that. Trevor Loco with
There you go.
5. I even wrote it like phonetically so I could say it right. Cliff Franson had 6, Keegan Smith with 5, even with a lot of foul trouble. A lot of those points were huge down the stretch for Keegan Smith, and he had a big steal late. Maddox Goo had that 3 off the bench, so it was a nice balanced effort for Fairland. And then, Grady Barber just did, kind of Grady Barber things. He's got kind of that pickup basketball game where if he's on your team, you're gonna win because he's gonna do the little things and he's going to find a way to score. He's a really intelligent player. He had 13 to lead the Warriors, 8 points for Chase Pinkerton, Cade Walkup, who buried a couple of threes, 6 for Drew Admiston. I thought Carter Cluxton played really
Oh,
well down the stretch for them coming off the bench. He had 4 points, 5 rebounds. I think it was like 4 and 4 in the fourth quarter. Had a couple of putbacks that gave them the lead at a couple different times in that fourth quarter. He played huge minutes off the bench for them, and I'm excited to get to see them again later this year. I know we probably can't stream down and see them when they play over at North Adams, but I think that rematch could be really, really interesting down the stretch down there in Seaman. That will likely decide their division of the Shack.
So that was all of the games on Saturday. So it was split, a 7-5 split to obviously equal the 12 total games. So 5 games on Sunday. It kicked off with the second girls' game of the showcase with Menford taking down Tays Valley.
Yeah, Menford with a 46-33 win over Tays Valley. They had a really balanced effort between their top two with Lindsay Williams. She eventually got the game MVP. She had 12 points, 11 rebounds, a minimum of 3 blocks. I think they had her for 5. So she just using her size and length and did a great job throughout the game. Lexi Conkle, I thought. like, you could just tell her game has grown from last year to this year. She had 15 points, led them in scoring. She had a couple of assists and steals as well. She can make a lot of different things happen. So it was kind of, pick your poison on that. Would have been nice to have 2 trophies in that situation for that because they were both outstanding. Maggie Reisner, I thought, played well despite some foul trouble. Ava Cronin, similar. Kerrigan Davis, I was impressed with what she was able to do off the bench. She had 7 points for them, provided some shooting on the outside. Marley Pendleton, as always, gives some really good minutes inside. Bailey Hammonds, Lexi Pendleton, some good minutes off the bench as well. So it was a lot of seniors, mostly seniors for Menford taking on Tays Valley, which is mostly sophomores. That Tays Valley team is one to watch for in the future. Tessa Horsley, Ava Mann, a couple of big time players for them, Cami Robbins, all sophomores. So if you see Tays Valley on a schedule in the next couple of years, try to get out and watch them because that's a well coached team that, with a lot of players coming up.
And then Minford girls and boys were scheduled back to back on
I thought that
Sunday.
was well done. I thought
Yeah,
that,
they did it with a couple teams. They did it with Fairland girls and boys. They also did it with Ashland Blazers
mhm,
girls and boys, and I believe those were the only three that it was done with. As Tays Valley's boys did not make the showcase,
mhm,
but for Minford's boys team, still undefeated on the year. It was a 63-59 win over a Hilliard Davidson team that probably middle of the pack, maybe towards the lower end of the middle out of
was it
the
OCC?
OCC. But you can look at last year what they did against teams out of the Southeast District. Yeah, they had a very similar matchup with the Miami Trace team that Minford did a season ago. Obviously, Minford, I believe, finished with maybe just shy of 20 wins, or maybe they were able
I
to
think it was
eclipse
19
20
and
wins,
5.
but very close to that 20 win mark. And last year, Hilliard Davidson goes 9-13. So
Mhm.
I think Hilliard Davidson definitely would be a good team if they played more
Yes.
games in the Southeast District. So I think it can be considered a big win for the Falcons, right? 63-59. Bennett Kaiser had a big night. Actually, it was more of a big
Yeah.
afternoon, as I believe that was the
2
2 p.m.
o'clock. Yep.
game. But for Kaiser, 25 points, 8 rebounds. Had a couple, really one massive block
Yep.
down the stretch. Uh, Montgomery hit a big three to put them ahead, a lead that I don't believe they gave up after that
Mhm.
point.
That was it. Yep.
Really exciting game.
Yeah, it was a really, really good game overall. Is Montgomery had 23 of 19 in the second half. He got off to a pretty slow start, and a big thing for them in that first half was Jackson Shoemaker looked like confidence wise the Jackson Shoemaker we saw as a sophomore, and so he was a lot more confident. He ended up with 13 and 7 rebounds. Bennett Kaiser kind of carried them in that first half, and then Montgomery carried them down the stretch. But I liked what I saw out of Ashton Reeder. Kate Glockner with a big rebound late, missed the free throws, but you can the 3 he shot that he missed later in the game, I think they were down 3 at the time, was completely online. He's just gotta find the range on that. He's gonna be okay. I liked what I saw out of Colt Donahoe. Ethan Cordell gave good minutes, Curtis Glenn. Like, they seem like they have more depth than what they had previously. And when you got those big 3, if you can just get a little bit of scoring like they did out of Reeder, that's just gonna be able to put them over the top. They were down 10 in the late in the 3rd quarter, down 5 in the 4th quarter. Just it was a really gritty, gutty win, and you mentioned Hilliard Davidson. I mean, Parker Maurer was awesome throughout the game. He had 25 points. Drew Rimlinger had 15, and that 3 he missed with, like, 15 seconds left, hit every part of the rim before coming out, and that was the big rebound by Glockner. And to me, one of my favorite parts of the game, and you wouldn't have noticed it as much because you weren't on the all the soccer games with them, was the soccer players late in the season all bleached their hair, besides Miles. Kudos to him because I wouldn't have done it. But and then, Bennett wasn't on the team, but he was the kind of their student section leader, one of them, and he bleached his hair. Who was the only one that still clearly had bleached hair? It was Bennett. So it was the soccer players, all their hair was like kind of all mixed back into like kind of normal, and then Bennett still had the very blonde hair. But man, that kid plays with so much they play so much for each other. You can just tell that play late where Reeder forced a loose ball near midcourt and Kaiser goes diving on it, just shows why they're gonna win a whole lot of games this year because of just how they play for each other. and it was pretty exciting. That was probably the most exciting crowd of the day or the 2 days as well because where they had the back to back crowds
And then the following game, I believe the largest margin of victory for the
on the
showcase
boys
on the
side.
boys' side,
Yeah,
right? Fairland had a pretty
girls.
big win
Yeah,
over Blazers. We went over, but the largest margin of victory for the 10 boys games was Jackson over Lakewood by 29 points. It was a 53-24 final.
I'm gonna be honest. The last 2 times I've seen Jackson play, I don't know what they do. I don't know if it's, like, you see them, like, physically, even though they're not the tallest, but, like, how strong they are and athletic that just makes teams just not give much effort. And then, like, they can really just grind you down because I saw a game last year where it was the worst effort I'd ever seen from one of our local teams, and they won by, like, 20. And then this game, Lakewood looked like they would rather have been anywhere else on earth, and I think it kind of affected how Jackson played because they didn't shoot the ball very well, but
Yeah.
a just utterly dominating 29-point win for Jackson. Ryan Simons was the MVP with 10 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Steven Jenkins had 12 points, 8 rebounds, most of that coming in the second half. I was impressed with what Charlie Woodard was able to do in the first half, Buddy Walford off the bench gave some really good minutes. Garrett Legg had a good start for him, but overall, this Jackson team, CJ Crabtree, I thought gave some really good minutes as well. So, and that was without Jax Carroll really, knocking down shots like he can. This is a Jackson team that coming off of a loss to Miami
Yeah.
Trace 2 days before it, you wouldn't be able to tell that they had any like hangover from that. Mostly juniors, one senior on the team. They are a team that is one to watch because I think with that FAC is being so tough with really 4 or 5 pretty good teams in it, it's not gonna be just no one's gonna go undefeated in my opinion. So Jackson still has a big, a lot to play in front of them, and ultimately it was good to see them for the first time this year with a really emphatic victory over that Lakewood team.
And then the second to last game on Sunday was Wheelersburg falling to Harvest Prep 80-65. Obviously, Harvest Prep, a runner-up in Division Two,
3.
or excuse me, Division Three last season. I believe they lost to Lutheran East in the state
Yeah.
final. So, a really good Harvest Prep team led by Brandon Roddy had a double double with 15 points and 10 assists. Yeah, it's a team that just has a lot of guys that can do a lot of things. Not to be very vague, but that's kind of a good way to describe
Yeah, like
how Harvest Prep operates.
yeah, they were just bringing different guys off the bench. Like David McGuire, like barely played early, and then just comes in and immediately gets like 2 steals and 2 layups immediately. Khalil Daniels didn't play very much early, ends up with 10 points. Jawan Wharton had 17, but almost all of that was in the first quarter. Ephraim Campbell, 18 and 9. They had a kid start that had literally no stats. And it didn't matter because you just keep bringing guys off the bench, and they are they are a machine. They're well coached. I feel like discipline wise, although at the end of the game we saw some stuff late, but I think that was a nice mix of things. I don't think that was just a one sided thing
Yeah.
where football seemed to be a little more one sided. But um, yeah, I was just always impressed with how they kind of carry themselves for the most part. An impressive performance from them, but really, I was impressed with what
Circleville girls lost
Oh, well,
by 9.
that'll change our I thought when I saw who they were playing, I was like, "Eh, that's probably not a great matchup," but,
Did you have them down as one of our? We
uh
weren't picking that game, were we?
uh, maybe with Fairfield Union, we'll see.
Well, no. I meant
Oh,
like
no,
that
no,
game.
not
Okay,
tonight.
yeah, okay.
No, but also, I was impressed with what Wheelersburg was able to do. Really, first quarter, they lose it by 4, second quarter, they lose by 12. That was the game, was that second quarter. Second half, they played really well, and it wasn't like Harvest Prep took their foot off the gas. They just,
I mean,
just kept
Williamsburg won the second
Yeah,
half
Williamsburg won
by
the
a
second
point.
yeah, won the second half by a point, and really, to me, I thought held their own in 3 of the 4 quarters. So, Xavier Miller, sophomore off the bench, had 19 points. Braylon Rucker had 14 points. I thought he really competed super hard throughout the game, especially having to handle the ball. They had a lot of turnovers in that second quarter, but other than that, it was kinda even for them turnover-wise. But then Landon McGraw didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but 10 assists, 7 rebounds as well for him. So they're a team. Xander Mowry was in double figures as well. So they're a team that's going to really compete. And I think once they get fully back, I think look for them in January. They're going to make some noise in the SOC3. Maybe not win it this year, but I think they're going to keep propelling themselves ready to make a big run next year because this is a team with mostly juniors and sophomores. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for Wheelersburg, and I really enjoy watching Coach Prater coach every game because he is coaching every second hard. And yeah, so that propelled us to our final game of the night, which was Washington and South Point. Washington with a ton of foul trouble in this one. They ultimately come from behind, win it 45-41. Roman Chavetsky was the game MVP, 18 points, 7 rebounds, had a big fast break late that put them from up 1 to 3. And then you had Noah Haithcock, who had 12 points, 10 of which were in the first half. But a lot of it was because where Javon Baker got in some foul trouble and they had to have a different ball handler, and it had to be Haithcock. And they put so much like physicality on him that really, you could tell late he was getting tired, but he made some winning plays down the stretch too. Baker ended with 6. Justin Everhart hit some big threes as well, hit 3 threes. He had 9 points for them. I was impressed with what Braden Hanshaw was able to do, 19 points. He overall just he did a little bit of everything for them. They didn't get him the ball a lot late, but I think that was more of what Washington was trying to do rather than what South Point was doing. It ended on an 11-2 run for Washington. I think it was a 4-point game. No, it was a 2-point game. It was 36-34. There was a foul on a shot and then a technical after. They made 1 out of the 4 free throws. They did score on the possession, but they had a chance to go up by 8, and they only went up by 5, and ultimately, they only scored 2 points after that. Ethan Lane had 10 points. Uh, Devon Lewis had 10 points as well. So I liked what I saw out of South Point. I think they are a team that you're just not gonna wanna see at any point throughout the season because they're well coached, have some good athletes, should be a really interesting team to follow throughout the season.
All right, that'll wrap it up for today. I'm just kidding. All right, so we've got a lot more to talk about. We have, I believe, we have 2 boys games. We're going to recap both out of the Frontier Athletic Conference, and then we're going to highlight, as if you didn't tune into last week's episode, we have kind of a new segment where we're going to pick one girls team and one boys team to just kind of hone in on and highlight from the previous week.
Yeah, this also, you mentioned, like, the recaps. We're gonna go kind of a little shorter on the recaps than what we normally would do, because normally we'll recap games that we were at. These are games where you can read the game stories on the SOSA Ohio website. The first one was written by Brock Netter. That got posted on Monday. Same thing for Carson Francis's. That was also posted on Monday as well. So if you want to read more about these games or check X, the Everything app, to see their tweets about the games to get even more in depth on them. We have interviews with players from both. So while we're going to recap them shortly, there is much more information out there on these 2 outstanding games in the Frontier Athletic Conference.
All right, so the first one, both of these were on Friday night. The first one was in Jackson. The Ironmen hosted the Miami Trace Panthers. In my eyes, I still think this is the case. The top 2 teams currently in the FAC. Obviously, I picked Jackson in the preseason, and I picked Jackson in our first edition of the Quick Picks. We'll follow up on that here in a little bit. But for Miami Trace, a big win on the road, 54-47, the final down in Jackson. Adam Guthrie continues to have what I would, consider to be probably a front running start in terms of the Player of the Year voting in the FAC. Really good start for the junior. 17 points and 9 rebounds, just 1 rebound shy of a double-double. 9 of those coming in the fourth quarter. So had a really big last quarter of play. Robinette and Salyers both with 9 points. Those are kind of the 2 guys that have stepped up for them on the hardwood this season. Obviously, after that first match with Unioto, we highlighted the contributions of Julian Baker and man, I can't remember the freshman's name. I think it was Gage something.
Bowers.
Gage Bowers, just a freshman.
From what I read was he handled the ball like really well down the stretch because Jackson was trying to up the pressure. and Bowers did a really good job in that one.
And, obviously it's two, very well coached teams with Max Morrow for Jackson and Ben Ackley for Miami Trace. I believe the Panthers still undefeated up to this point in the
Mhm.
season. I did not check who they have coming up on the schedule this week, but, for Miami Trace, they just continue to roll here this season.
Yeah, they've played really well to start this year, and really, I think they were one of the question marks coming into the year because Guthrie had a football injury
Yep.
and then didn't really play in the preseason, so I don't think people had a real idea of what it's a big one on Tuesday, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chillicothe at Miami Trace.
Yeah, so that's a big one for sure, and
McClain a little bit later in the week, and
mhm,
then at Zane Trace on Saturday.
yeah,
So,
it's a big week.
there's some high profile games coming up for the Panthers.
If they go 3-0, that's our team of the week next week. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that makes it kinda easy if
Yeah.
they make it through that little bit of a gauntlet because you got do they have to come to Chillicothe twice? Just once.
N no, they're at home against
Okay.
Chillicothe. So,
So, yeah, for Miami Trace, they've gotten off to a really nice start this year. I think the length that they can provide as well defensively makes them a really tough matchup. Now for Jackson, a lot of juniors. Charlie Woodard had 13 points, Stephen Jenkins 13 points, Buddy Wolford 11 points in the game. I think Woodard may have had 14, but overall for Jackson, you hope that you can like you can protect your home court. Unable to do so in this matchup, so that for them probably a disappointing loss. But like we said in the kind of the rundown over the game with Lakewood, it was a good bounce back game. They've got is it 2 or 3 games this week?
3 games for Jackson this week. They're home against McClain on Tuesday, at Hillsboro on Friday, Watkins
Uh,
Memorial on Saturday, after Christmas at Meigs. So an interesting 4-game stretch coming up for the Ironmen.
yeah, and the Watkins Memorial game will be played at Logan. I believe that's like the 6:30 game, so that one will probably have a massive crowd due to the Buckeyes playing that day. I think I might be going over there early. The slate's not the greatest, but it's still the chance to get to
Be at
see
a
some of the teams.
Christmas party on Saturday, so
Hey, there you go. You wanna get out of it by calling a game? Just
I don't
kidding.
I don't know if that's an option,
Yeah,
but
but yeah, this is a Jackson team that with this week coming up, we'll preview the game on Friday at Hillsborough. That's one of our games that we're gonna talk about. That might be a make or break game for both of those teams because if you have 2 losses in the FAC, even though I think the winner will more than likely have something like 2 losses, that puts you way behind because you could be starting off 1 and 2, and that's gonna be hard to come back from.
moving on, our second FAC game we're going to talk about at the the Hatton Gymnasium. What was it recently? What was the court
Tom
named?
Cuppet.
Yeah, the Tom
Tom
Cuppet
Cuppet.
Court at the Hatton Gymnasium at Chillicothe High School. Pretty much anything at Chillicothe named after something. I'm not sure if their baseball and softball fields are named
They used to be. I
anything.
don't
Well,
know if
obviously the baseball field has been moved to behind Mount Logan
it
in
used
the
to
last
be. I'm
couple of
trying to
years,
remember.
but
But,
uh,
Coach Cuppet was a great coach at Chillicothe. I think I actually have his record on here, so I'm gonna show off the Unioto basketball.weebly.com here. Tom Cuppet, 184 and 73. Finished his last season 22 and 1.
what was his
Oh,
last year?
1981. So,
Okay.
here's my question. Why did it take so long? Like, seriously, why would it
Is
take
he still
I
around?
don't know. Like,
I mean, I didn't know who he was until
right. Well, because I wasn't even alive whenever he coached last, so that's kind of why would you know if I barely knew? The only reason I know is from looking him up. So they won the sectional and district multiple times, or one time district champions, but that was also, I think, when they had to go, it was a little bit bigger at that time, a little more difficult at that time to do so. So yeah, Tom Cuppet probably deserved to have the court named after him probably a long time ago because that's 44 years since he last coached. So yeah.
But for Chillicothe, it was a 62-56 win over the Hillsboro Indians, who obviously have running player of the year, returning player of the year in Tate Davis, although not the best player on the court or in terms of scoring on Friday night. We'll get to that in a moment. But for Chillicothe, it was a big night for Caden Cox, 16 points. For him, Cam Badger had a big one as well, 14 points. 4 players for them in double figures, and arguably the leading returner, the lowest out of those four is Andrew Hammond had 12, and Cooper Stone King, a third team All-Ohioan a season ago in Division One, just 11 points for him, I believe, a junior for
Mhm.
Chillicothe. This is a team that in the preseason, and Chillicothe now 2-3 on the year. It's a team that we said, obviously had Stone King returning. Juan Miller was a name that we threw out there. Heard he had a good game that night
Yeah.
as well, just listening to Shane on the radio.
Well, and I'm sure he was probably on Tate Davis, probably just
Right,
trying to
Shane said that, his defensive efforts were very strong, but, it's a team that we said, they're really really young last year playing in a tough league, and all those guys are coming back, and some of those guys, Caden Cox, Cam Badgers, Andrew Hammond, a sophomore as well, and obviously Cooper Stone King, his first year as an upperclassman. It's a team that had a lot of guys coming back. They seem to be going in the right direction. They're gonna have a lot of guys coming back next year. I think this is gonna be the start of a run for this Chillicothe team.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Coach Beard does a good job with them, and maybe people weren't able to see it because the results weren't really there over the last couple of years. But it's just sometimes it just takes a while. Sometimes, especially when you're playing such young kids. I mean, last year you're playing a freshman in Caden Cox, and you're already seeing how it is,
Right.
carrying over and making them better throughout. Did you throw out the Carson stat?
I have not.
Okay, so according to our own, so SOSA, Southern Ohio Sports Authority, presented by Perfection One, presented by Ohio Health. What? Our own Carson Francis. This is the first time since 2019 that Chillicothe has started off 1-0 in FAC play, which is kind of insane for how good of a program it has been
Yep.
over the last,
Especially in 2020. I mean,
yeah,
that's when like Beard was still there, and I believe Trey Beard graduated in 2021. So, or no, I guess
mm-mm.
his last year was so okay. Yeah, that
Well,
makes sense.
yeah,
Actually, that does make sense because his last winter would have been 2019.
yeah.
So I
So
guess
they
that adds
were,
up.
yeah, I shouted him out down there at the
I
Waller
figured
Gymnasium.
yeah, because I zoomed in on the banner. I was hoping that's what you guys
Yeah,
would
I
get
threw
out
that
of
out
that.
there. So, yeah, that it's a Chillicothe program that has been down for a few years, but with the excellent coaching, and typically they have some nice athletes through there. But sometimes your athletes leave. Like sometimes they go elsewhere. Sometimes you know they don't come out. Also,
Right.
so and you never know when things happen. So for them, it's an impressive win, a good start. I mean, I think we saw when they went to Warren, even though they lost. They went to Warren, went to overtime with them. I think that's when they kinda opened our eyes and we're like, "Uh-oh, these guys are gonna be pretty good." So, good start for Chillicothe. Did you go over the points for Hillsboro on that? So, Jack Howland, 24 points, led them. Tate Davis, 13. Xander Lake, 15 and 11. So, we'll talk more in depth on those guys a little bit later. But for Hillsboro, not all is lost yet, but still now you got to kind of fight from behind and battle your way back.
All right, we're gonna go over our team of the week. Gonna head up to Pickaway County, a big week for the Mustangs. 2-0, both games they won in league play. 62-57 on Tuesday over Huntington, and then 61-58 at the Dome Friday night. Big one over Unioto. It seems like at the Dome, Westfall, no matter what their team looks like, maybe a favorite every time they play at home. I mean, it doesn't even matter who they're playing. They
Yeah,
just play really, really well at home.
it's a hard place to play. The locker rooms are better. The gym's better. It's still a hard place to play because it's a little bit different. It's small. It's I didn't look closely. I watched some of the game on the live stream, but I didn't look closely to see if they had chairs out or if it was like you're sitting in the bleachers. Like because for years you sat in the bleachers there as with the teams. It's a hard place to play. It just is. But if you're used to it, you love it. You play better there. You play at a higher level. It's a good crowd. They're always on top of you. It's hot. There's a lot of things where if you're used to it, it's just the normal Friday night. But they had a 1 point loss to Washington Courthouse there. They lost by 3 to Zane Trace, then they beat Unioto by 3. So they've played 3 really good teams, very, very close all at the Dome. So 3-2 start for them. In the 2 wins, Joe Ray was outstanding, 23 and
Yeah.
a half points a game in those 2 wins. The point guard can do a little bit of everything. He can get to the basket, he can shoot in the mid-range, he can get to the free throw line. Shot takes it's kinda low on the outside, but when he gets it off and he's got his feet set, it's a good shot from the outside as well, so that's evident in those 2 wins, just kind of, being the go-to guy for the Mustangs. Brian Craig had 20 points in the win over Unioto. The lefty sophomore did a really good job there. And then Hayden Rigsby had 13 points in the win over Huntington. So if you can get all 3 of those guys scoring at a time, they're going to be really good. And this week they were able to get some contributions from some other players as well. So this week they've got 3 games that are, to me, winnable, with Piketon Tuesday, Southeastern on Friday, and then Fisher Catholic goes to the Dome on Saturday. So I believe the Southeastern game is at Southeastern and Piketon is at home. So those are going to be games, that I think ultimately they're probably going to be favored in. And if they want to compete for the SVC, you've got to win those first 2 games for sure to give yourself a chance to be at 5-1 at the break, as opposed to 4-2 or possibly 3-3. So a nice week for the Mustangs. Watch for them, and Sporting Pumpkin does a nice job of covering them as well. So we'll hopefully be up at the Dome sometime soon. Maybe streaming, but also maybe just overall coverage as well. So good win for them, and that's kind of our team of the week.
All right, we're going to jump into the previews. 2 games coming up this Friday, both league games. We mentioned the one earlier on. It was Jackson at Hillsboro. But we're going to start with Zane Trace at Unioto. This game will be broadcasted on the YouTube channel. John and I will be there in person. And if you're going to go to the game in person at Unioto, you're going to get there early. Usually that place fills up pretty
Speaking of
quick
not very
during
big,
yeah,
yeah,
usually fills up pretty quick during the freshman games, just based on the 2 teams that are playing, right? It's a rivalry that, is consistent throughout every single sport, and basketball probably the most heated, just based on how close, the players are to the fans and how close the fans are to the action. Football, obviously everybody's a little spread apart. But I think basketball is where you get some of your more heated moments. And
yeah.
I forget the stat. I had it written down for the game we did last year, but it was like 4 of the last 5, or like 5 of the last 6 matchups have been decided by like 4 or less points. So it's always a really close matchup. And, obviously Zane Trace without Landon Gerald going in. Now for Zane Trace, been playing really well without him so far.
Yeah, they're 6-0. I mean, I don't know if anyone expected that early, with when you lose your leading scorer, your leading returner, your point guard. You don't expect to get off to that kind of start. You expect maybe some growing pains as well. But then Grady Stewart has stepped in and has been unreal, especially from 3. Like this stat I'm going to say is kind of ludicrous at this point. The junior is averaging 13.8 points a game, but he is shooting 61% from 3, 14
Mhm.
of 23. You cannot let him dribble into a shot, step into a shot, anything, because he's going to knock it down, especially right now because he has been red hot for the Pioneers. New coach over there as well, so maybe some extra confidence for some of these players that maybe didn't get the ball as much last year, didn't get some of the shots maybe they were hoping for. Um, but it seems like a really balanced effort for them. Gunnar McCullough has really came alive, 12.8 points a game, 7.5 rebounds inside. Last year, he shot poorly from the free throw line. Now he's shooting 79%. And with how physical he plays, he's getting to the line at a high clip as well. Speaking of a really good free throw shooter, you got Landon Robinson, 16 of 18 at the line so far, 89%. As a sophomore, he was their starting point guard. Seemingly, it seemed like he was playing out of position at the time, but it has really paid off for them, because without Gerald, he's been able to just step right in and just go right back to that role that he played 2 years ago. 10.3 points a game, 5.7 rebounds a game, 38% from 3. He's had a really nice start to his senior year. He's a really competitive kid, good athlete, really good defender. Speaking of good defenders, the next 2 kids you got are Ezra Rippeth, averaging 8.7 points a game, and Noah Houston, 4.8 points a game. Not a ton of depth. Roman Berry's given them some good minutes off the bench so far this year, but really not a ton of depth. So maybe that could be something interesting to look for in this one. You mentioned off the top of my head, at least I think it's 3 of the last 4 years, the game has came down to a game-winning shot in the last 5 seconds at Unioto especially.
Maybe that's what it was, is at Unioto,
Yeah,
it's
at
been really
Unioto, the games
close.
are crazy close. Last year at Zane Trace was pretty close, or was very close as well. I think it ended up being a 3-point game where Unioto didn't get a shot off because of how, you know, elevated the Zane Trace defense was late. I think there's good news on Landon Jarrell. Won't be back for this one, but will be back very soon, like sooner rather than later, like was expected. So really good news there for Zane Trace. They're just going to be better when you get him and add him back to the lineup. For Unioto, a 3-2 start overall, 3-1 in the SVC. They're led by Blake Fitch, 16 points a game, 6 assists. He's an 89% free throw shooter, same as Landon Jarrell on the 16 for 18 from the line. Blake Hoops had a nice start to his senior year, 12.4 points a game, 13 of 29 from three, 45%. So that's ultimately a really good start if you can get him to shoot from three, because once he gets going to the hoop, he's really tough to stop. KB Perkins starting to come along, 7.4 points a game, 6.8 rebounds a game. Seems like he's getting healthy at the right time, especially with this game coming up on Friday. And then Caden Cutright and Jackson Zickafoose are the next starters. Also, really good defensive players. Zickafoose averaging 8.4 points a game, Cutright 6.2 points a game. Now, the big key for them, those two averaging, quick math, 14.6 points a game.
There you
But
go.
that's including the game at Westfall when they combined for 2 points. And they were, I believe it was 0 for 12 from the field, may have been 0 for 10 from the field combined. So they need those two to be able to score as well, because if they're able to score, that just makes them a more dangerous team. Union has a better depth, but right now Zane Trace is playing much better. So it'll be interesting to see how these two match up. Should be a fun one. As you mentioned, we're going to get there super early. We're going to get to see the freshman game. So should be fun to get set up there as always. Last year was an instant classic there when you did the game 2 years ago. Was that with Kenneth or Brian?
Which one?
2 years ago. Union at Zane Trace.
Unioto at Zane Trace, I think I was
No,
with
no, Zane
Shane.
Trace at Union. I mean.
Oh, yeah, it was with Kenneth.
Okay, yeah. So that was a
Which one? When Robinson had the putback?
yeah.
That was Mike and Tom.
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
Mike
did it with Kenneth on another network 3 years
3 years
ago.
ago,
That
and
was
that
when
was
Branson hit the
and that was also it's been 3 straight years.
that we've done it, or that I've at
Well,
least had been there, I
yeah.
guess.
Well, I mean that has been a buzzer beater.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, you look back to the 2019 season, the 2019-2020 season, it obviously came down to the horn. 2020, not so much as Unioto. That was kind of the down year before this next
Mm,
run for Zane Trace. And then in 21 was the Branson shot.
mm,
22 was the Robinson putback. And then
mm.
last year, obviously, was the Fitz shot. So,
Yeah.
for the last 5 meetings have been a one possession game at Unioto. Three of those a buzzer beater. So, or
Yeah.
not a buzzer beater, but like
At
you said, a
least
game
it
winner in the
yeah.
last 3 or 4 seconds. So, this
And two
matchup,
two of them were buzzer beaters,
yeah,
but yeah.
this matchup doesn't seem to disappoint too often in Frenchtown. So.
Yeah, and I think with, both with new coaches, both teams wanting to play for the SVC, Unioto's SVC hopes probably come down to getting a win in this game and protecting the home court. So should be a fun one for sure over there in Frenchtown.
All right, we can move on to our final game preview of the week. Jackson at Hillsboro. I think this is a very interesting matchup, right? So you have a team in Jackson, obviously, that coming off the win against Lakewood. I cannot remember off the top of my head who they play on Tuesday. I believe is their other league night.
I
I
think we
think
said
it
it was
might
McClain.
be McClain. But at Hillsboro on Friday, coming off the win against Lakewood, but coming off of the loss last Friday. So by the time this game happens, they'll be a week removed from the loss at home against Miami Trace. I think even though both of these teams losing league games on Friday, they still have league aspirations. We've talked about it a ton. Tate Davis, the reigning player of the year out of the FAC. And then Jackson, in terms of guys coming back, probably returning the most upperclassmen heavy core, right? They had that
Mm,
big junior class. And obviously had Garrett Lake transferring in from Piketon. So, I know we're not, I don't believe, are we picking this game? Is this one of the games we're
It's
picking?
one of the games we're
Okay,
picking.
so I'll leave
Well,
that.
like we're not gonna pick the Unioto game because we're calling it.
Right.
So,
But I'll leave the pick for a moment, but excited to see the final from this one.
yeah, this one should be really exciting. Like you said, it's a matchup of teams with a lot coming back. Sander Lake coming in for Hillsboro, Garrett Legg coming in for Jackson, which is kind of funny because it's both a position that they both needed help, which was inside, and then they're just going to be counteracting each other anyway. So that one should be really fun. Tate Davis going against that backcourt for Jackson should be fun to watch. Jack Howland, 17.7 points a game. Just he's a sophomore that can really fill it up for them, and they're a team, really to watch later in the season. But like you said, this is a game that ultimately is going to be big in deciding who wins the FAC. The loser is not out of it, but they're in trouble because probably 3 losses is not gonna have a chance to win the league. 2, you still have an outside chance to probably share it because remember, in the FAC, there's only 6 teams, so you're only playing 10 league games. So any losses are major in that category. So Hillsborough hadn't played very many games. They've got one on Tuesday, but this one on Friday is obviously a massive one for them. So like you said, it should be a really fun one for sure. I'm going to look to check our schedule real quick on if anyone said they're going to be there. No one has signed up for it yet, but I'm sure we will have someone down there. And I would guess that we will have pictures from our boy Ray
Yeah, I was
Ray.
gonna say with that one being in Highland County, hopefully Raymond can get over there for what should be a pretty good game
Yeah.
out of the FAC. But yeah, like you said, Howland, I think one of the better underclassmen in the
Hmm.
coverage area. Obviously, Tate Davis, the reigning FAC Player of the Year, both averaging over 15 points per game through their first 3 games. I don't know. Like the one thing I'll say about Jackson is as talented as they've been that team that it just seems like over the last couple years, they've been that team that will lose a game you don't expect them
Hmm.
to, just like out of nowhere. Still a really good team and a team that also can win games out of nowhere. It's a really, really dangerous team, a well coached team.
So I'll throw some of that on the shooting. They don't shoot it really well from the outside. So
Seems like a lot of lower scoring games for
yeah,
them.
lower scoring. So I think if there's a game where defensively they have a harder time slowing down the opponent, it's hard for them to put up points in a hurry. Now, they blew out an Athens team that, I mean, you weren't there for the live stream, for it was me and Carson, but on the live stream that looked pretty decent. So, like, when they get going, they can be really hard to stop. But shooting wise, they don't shoot it really well from the outside. If they can get Woodard going from the outside, Jax Carroll going from the outside, that makes them a really dangerous team because what like a kid like Bodie Wolford can do off the bounce, Steven Jenkins can do off the bounce. They're a team that is very dangerous. I think ceiling wise is extraordinarily high, but at the same time, I do think the lack of outside shooting can make it to where they can have the lower scoring games, which can make them more susceptible to an upset as well, like you said.
Maybe a little tougher to play from behind when you're not
Yes.
having a great night from beyond the arc.
Yeah,
So
where like I'll just throw out like one of those games from the other day was that Kettering Alder game. So where they started to hit some threes late, and that's why ultimately they made it a little more interesting. Where a game where they didn't shoot the ball well, that's why they were down by so much. But yeah, it should be a fun one for sure, and that's why we're gonna pick it here in just a minute.
all right, quick picks coming up, powered by Views Gym. We've got 5
Aye.
boys games we're going to go over. Not really go over, but we're just going to pick winners for. I will actually have a graphic that goes out on social media this week. So
That's why we're doing this
great.
at
But
9:25 instead of 7:25 since you were working on it.
yeah. But going back on last week in the boys side, you had a clean sweep. You go 5-0 on the boys side. I go 2-3. Um,
So I'll start.
yeah, okay. And we're gonna
Yeah.
make it to where whoever is in the lead, so including the girls, John is 8-2. I'm 5-5 overall. So we're gonna make it to where the person that's leading in the standings has to pick first. That way, whoever's leading can't just pick the same, and that way make it to where whoever's behind can't make up any ground. So And then I made up that rule, and it wasn't because I'm losing, because we still have a
That's
ton of time left. But I just felt like that'd be the most fair thing to do. So
yeah. So
um,
we'll start off a Thursday game. Will be our first one for the quick pick, powered by Views Gym, located in beautiful Kingston, Ohio. First up, like I said, Thursday, got Chesapeake at South Point. Uh, Chesapeake, we haven't really heard much of Max KZ. Obviously, we saw him last year, an outstanding freshman last year. This year is, I believe starting off strong. P. Floyd on Southeastern Ohio Prep should have a rundown of their game with Guy Academy coming up later, so where at least someone's getting some eyes on them. But I think for Chesapeake, even though it's at South Point, I'm gonna take the Panthers. I think it will be a tight game. Um, you know, they hammered Portsmouth last week to start, so it's a big one for South Point. But I'm gonna take Chesapeake in this one.
yeah, I mean, it's a South Point team that obviously played Fairland very close. Fairland and Chesapeake haven't played yet. Um, That'll be a good matchup now that I think about it. It's too bad both of those gymnasiums are
Yeah,
pretty far away from where we're located. I think the safe pick here is obviously Chesapeake. Chesapeake bringing back a lot from last year. South Point is a lot better than I thought they would be. Um, but you look at the common opponent in Portsmouth. I know we buried transitive properly earlier
right.
in the episode, but it was like a 30-point win over Portsmouth for Chesapeake and just a 2-point win for South Point over Portsmouth. So I think I'm going to roll with the Panthers as well. So
Yeah, I think that's a smart pick.
I'd be surprised if
Okay.
we have the same pick here.
Yeah, we'll see. It is a Have you ever been to Hillsboro's gym?
No, I know they have a
It is
massive,
massive.
like, font size 89 on the court H. Like, it
Yes.
just, and the gym itself is just a very large looking gym.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a great gym. It is
it has to
gigantic.
echo in there
It's huge,
severely.
yeah. Well, and especially the last time I was in there was the COVID year, so
Oh,
there's
yeah.
nobody in there.
Oh,
That was I think we got called for 9 charges in the varsity game.
there you go.
It was the most miserable night ever. It's one of my 2 losses in 34 games that year of
Hmm.
coaching. 'Cause I had to do because our freshman coach had a young baby, so,
You may have lost to Tate Davis. Did he play JV as a freshman? That may have been who you lost to
um,
back in COVID.
oh,
I don't, he may have been in eighth grade at that
I'm
point
trying to remember if he played.
because that would have been my senior
Yeah,
year.
because I
So
didn't, Blake Hoops didn't play for me, and
yeah.
him and Tater are
So
buddies,
you
so,
just missed him. I don't
yeah.
know. I don't even know if he played JV. I'm assuming
I
maybe
think
at
he
least
played
a
a little
year.
just because he was a little smaller, but, um, yeah, that next year, I don't know if we played him the next year or not, but, yeah, yeah, Tate's outstanding, and in that gym, I think it's gonna be a really tight game. I'm not even sure, like, that I'm gonna feel confident in either team, but I'm gonna take the home team in this one. I'm gonna take the Indians to protect their home court, Hillsborough to move to, well, I'm gonna assume 2-1 in the FAC with a big one over Jackson. I'm gonna say this will be a 5-point game.
See, now I was gonna pick Jackson anyway, but this is what's gonna like. I'm gonna pick Hillsborough to win at Chile last week. They're gonna lose. Now I'm gonna go against them and they're gonna win. That's just how it goes. Jackson's still my pick to win the FAC. I'm still gonna roll with that. I think at some point somebody's gonna beat Miami Trace because Miami Trace still has to go. Obviously to Chillicothe, which we
Mhm,
kind of dubbed as a very tough place to play. They still have to go to Hillsborough, and obviously they still have to play Jackson at home again, which will more than likely be
mhm,
a little bit easier in terms of environment than playing at Jackson. But for Jackson at Hillsborough, I think I'm going to go with the Ironman. I think I got to make up some ground here in the picks. And I think this would be a good game to do so. I think Jackson's going to be riding high after a win on Tuesday. So they're going to pick up a win on Friday as well.
okay, I can dig that.
All right.
So next,
Battle of the Traces.
we got the Trace matchup, which
This
was
was
at one point streamed
This was
Was a game streamed on SOSA, maybe the greatest camera work ever by
post game, man.
Carson Francis.
If
So
you're watching, yeah, I feel like it's all right if we plug it. I mean, it's
I
still
mean,
on YouTube, so whatever.
none of those kids involved were in high school,
No,
so, or
if
are still in high school.
if you
So
want to be entertained, go watch the clock roll to 0 in the fourth quarter and just watch for about the next 15 seconds after that. It's one of the greatest. It's one of the greatest moments in stream history. I think Mike and Tom were on that one because I was running computer and Carson was obviously on camera for that one. So that was a fun night.
hey, you know what I will say? Like, even though it was a 5'10"
Yeah,
kid getting in the face of a 6'8" kid, like, kudos to him for that. Like, for because it was so ridiculous, and it's definitely worth going back and going through the archives and finding because it is it's
yeah.
hilarious. Like, we don't condone it because, like, you don't wanna see anything, but it was really well done by
Uh,
I don't even know why he would've like, normally, we just, like, go to the middle of the court or we go to, like, the scoreboard. It was like, no, he just found this not really altercation, it was just trash talking.
it was a I don't yeah.
One person points at the scoreboard, the other one points at something else, so, yeah.
Anyway,
Jason Zane
yeah,
Trace.
2024-25 season now. Panthers and Pioneers at this point still undefeated. Now will both be Saturday. Who knows? But as it stands, both teams I about
Unbeaten.
said winless. Yeah,
Yeah.
unbeaten here this season. So
Yeah, so this one should be fun. I think with Miami Trace's length,
yep,
it's gonna
yep,
cause some issues for Zane Trace because, like, if when I look back at Zane Trace against Circleville, early in that game, they struggled against the length in the zone that Circleville had. Now, when they were able to get him out of it, Circle couldn't guard them at all, and it ended up being kind of a blowout in that situation. So I think Zay Trace is going to definitely have a chance in this game. I love the way Gunnar McCullough plays. I think he's very physical. I think he does a really good job. I just don't know if they have the depth if McCullough gets in foul trouble to deal with Adam Guthrie on the interior because Guthrie is very difficult to stop. People, most teams have a really difficult time. I think with the tape being out, I think with what, you know, Zane Trace has been able to do, I think they'll have a good game plan coming into it. But ultimately, I'm going to take Miami Trace. I do think that they can keep this, they can possibly keep this as a low scoring game. Miami Trace lost to New Lexington last year in the tournament at Zane
yeah.
Trace. So they
I forgot about that. Oh,
did not
buzzer
shoot well
beater.
there. Yeah.
That
So,
was a crazy shot.
yeah. And they have some bad memories. They want to try to get rid of those ghosts. I'm going to take Miami Trace. This one I also think is going to be a fairly close game
Yeah, I was thinking about it. It's kind of interesting that you bring that up because to start the year, Miami Trace hosted Unioto, whose season ended
at Miami
at
Trace.
Miami Trace,
Yes.
not against Miami Trace, but against
Yeah.
Logan Elm in that gym. Now Miami Trace traveling to another SVC school
Mhm.
against Zane Trace, where their season ended against a team not named Zane Trace. So
Mhm.
that's kind of an interesting parallel there. I may have that may have been a bit of a stretch, but I was just kind of thinking about that in the back of my head. Yeah, I think Miami Trace up to this point, obviously Gunnar McCullough, I think, is kind of the biggest guy, the tallest guy
Mhm.
on the team. I haven't seen them in person. Noah Houston, I believe I remember being relatively tall for
He's
them
got he's really good
and
length.
long as well.
And that's the same with Grady Stewart.
Right, but man, I just Adam Guthrie's a big dude. So it's like, who's gonna body that kid? And the
Mhm.
answer up to this point is nobody. I have not seen it, and I'm not sure. It's gonna either take a guy similar to his size or somebody that can throw some weight around in the weight room. So until proven otherwise, I think this Miami Trace team, there's not a lot of teams that can handle them offensively. I know they've had some tight games. Obviously, Jackson and Logan Elmore too. That's been very early on
Mhm.
classics this season. But I'm going to roll with the Panthers as well. I think they've been impressive so far.
Yeah, this one I think we maybe both be similar on this pick as well. Like maybe on the boys side we're not going to be as
I mean,
but
I
anyway.
think I know where you're going with this, but Corpus looked good
Right.
on Sunday against South Point.
Yeah, so Chillicothe at Washington Courthouse. I think Washington's a tough place to play. this is a Friday night game as well. So Chillicothe will be coming off of a hard fought game no matter what on Tuesday when they've got to go at Miami Trace. Washington's coming off a game with Hillsboro that will be on Tuesday as well. So both teams will be coming off of will be more than likely very difficult games one way or the other. So I think this could be a big one as well. So if let's say if Chillicothe loses to Miami Trace, they cannot afford to lose this game. If Washington loses to Hillsborough, they can't afford to lose this game. So this is a big game in the FAC. Ultimately, I'm going to take Chillicothe. I think that they're going to have some length that they can throw at Haithcock, and I don't know if they have the physicality that South Point did, where South Point was able to just kind of throw in, like a land advance that wasn't ever going to shoot, and he could just really go out and just guard Haithcock and really just physically body him. I think that I'm going to, with Chillicothe, I think with Caden Cox, I think that gives them kind of a player maybe at the next level. I think Chajewski's going to have a lot to do with this game for Washington as well. But I think with Caden Cox, ultimately, I think Cooper Stone King has a big game in this one. So I'm going to take the Cavaliers on the road.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've seen Courthouse in person. Chajewski had a really good night, won the game MVP against South Point to wrap up the second annual battle in the 7-4-0 on Sunday. I haven't seen Chillicothe in person, but it just seems like they have a lot more depth maybe than Courthouse
Mhm.
does. They have a lot more guys that can fill it up and a lot of young guys. Now, these teams are that they're both really young. I just think
Mhm.
for Zane Trace, or excuse me, for Chillicothe, a lot more seasoned young guys, a
Mhm.
lot of guys that have been around for a while, whether they're juniors or sophomores and have a year to 2 years under their belt of varsity experience. I think Courthouse has a lot of young guys that maybe this is their first year being in the spotlight. Chajewski being one of them,
Mhm.
obviously got some minutes last year, but this is his first year being, one of the main guys for Coach Bartriff. But I think, as it stands, even though this game's going to be at Courthouse, I think Chillicothe is going to pull away with this one.
Yeah,
So
you mentioned some guys maybe in their first like starting role, but like Haithcock was like
Haithcock as
he
well.
was
Yeah.
an important guy last year, but now he's the guy.
Right.
And there is a big difference in that going from being like the fourth option to the
A
first
guy to
option.
the guy.
Yeah.
Right.
From being the fourth option to the first option, you could tell, he was working really hard in that game against South Point, just couldn't really get anything going in that second half. And I think maybe Chillicothe sees that video and then maybe looks to do something similar, but a lot of that comes down to if, Justin Everhart doesn't hit threes or if Baker gets in foul trouble again. So there's some caveats there. If they can keep Baker on the floor, I think that makes it to where Haithcock can just play more of his game, and that makes them more dangerous in this one. But be interesting. I think it's two well coached teams should be a fun one as well. Our last one for the quick pick, which has not been that quick, but and that's why it's kind of a fun name too, because it's not the super quickest, but it's more of like we don't prepare what we're doing on this. Like
No.
like we said, it's 9:38 right now. We picked these games right before we went on, like on like what we're gonna pick. So we didn't have any time to fully prep. But this one, Vinton County at Athens, I think with Cobra Sharp, I think Vinton County is a team that has some talent coming back. That game with maybe Meggs was making a statement, ends up being a 30-point game between those two. I liked what I saw out of Athens. I think with the point guard matchup, I think this one will be interesting. You know, right off the top of my head, I'm blanking right now on Athens. Um,
No, I mean, yeah, for Athens,
yeah,
they're off to a 3-2 start. I mean, some of the guys, Leo Martin,
Leo Martin was
a
who I
really
was
good
thinking of.
player for them. The Chapman kid had the big shot against Nelsonville York. That was or was it? Yeah, it was Nelsonville York.
Yes,
That was a really good
they
game
had a
that
really big game the next
you
game too.
guys were able to get down and see. It was a big performance for Athens on the road. Now Athens at home against a Vinton County team that I think is, you know, very similar to them. I haven't seen much of either team. I'm going to keep it quick. Name of the segment. I'm going to roll with the Bulldogs at home.
You didn't even let me pick.
I didn't. I picked in front of you.
Yeah, you did. I
I
don't
was
like that
quicker.
because I was pretty much thinking something similar. So just for funsies, I'm gonna go. Mm,
I didn't know if you were ready to pick, but I was. I
You
was
were
ready to
you
pick.
you were a quick pick. So I think Leo Martin is a difference maker in this, but ultimately I'm going to take Cooper Sharp and the Vikings because it's been a while since Athens has beat them, and I think it's going to be just a hair longer. But if if Colin Chapman can keep hitting from long range, I think that makes them very dangerous as well. So that's I think that one's going to be a fun one to follow.
So just to recap the boys' quick picks, we both picked we both picked Chesapeake to beat South Point. I stumbled through that one. I picked Jackson to beat Hillsboro. John picks Hillsboro to beat Jackson. We both pick Miami Trace over Zane Trace. We both pick Chillicothe over Courthouse, and John takes Vinton County. I take Athens. So
Yeah, it should be fun. So just get into, some other games to watch for this week. If you get a chance, get out and watch some of these games. Tuesday, Chillicothe at Miami Trace, that's a big one. Hillsboro at Washington. Wheelersburg at Western. Western with a tight win over Waverly on Saturday, a 38-34 game, which we both picked last week. And I believe we both picked Western in that, right?
yeah, that
Yeah.
was one of the games
Yeah.
that we both picked. It's 38,
38,
34.
38,
Minnesota.
34. Western got out to a huge lead. Waverly with a nice comeback, but ultimately unable to do so. Minford at Sims Valley, West at Eastern Pike, which is where I'm planning to go to on Tuesday. And then, Benton County, Athens that we talked about. Fairfield at Peebles. That's going to be an interesting one. Peebles off to a perfect start in shack play, but I think likely have played the bottom tier of the shack. So I think that one's going to be interesting. Wish that game was at
Eastern
Fairfield.
at West. We should have picked that one. Can we have that as an emergency pick?
West at Eastern? It's West
Mm.
at Eastern.
Oh, West. Oh, either way, West and Eastern.
Yeah, so let's
Man, we
say
should've-
let's say one of these games gets postponed. Who do you want to take?
I'll take Eastern.
I'm going to take West. So
That
yeah.
one was quick.
Yeah, that was like literally a quick pick because it wasn't even on the schedule. So next on Thursday, we talked about it a little bit. Chesapeake at South Point is one to watch there. Kind of interested to see what if Ironton starts league play then, because if they do, they will play 3 straight days to start the year because the Ironton Classic is this weekend. That one I didn't even throw it on there for Friday, but Minford at Ironton is the late game. I think Carson's going to be there and he's going to give some updates. So that'll be a game, at least just to see where Ironton's at, because it's a couple weeks after they won the state championship. Can't imagine they're going to be on the level with Minford yet, but it will be interesting to see how that game plays out. Also on Friday, Westfall at Southeastern, Chillicothe at Washington, which we talked about. Obviously, these are other games to watch. Belpre is off to an undefeated start. We're going to see where they're at when they go to Megs, who is just destroying people. They were one of my thoughts on the team of the week, but I think later on they will probably be one of our teams of the week because it seems like they are just rolling. Saturday, Miami Trace at Zane Trace, Wheelersburg versus Monroe Central at the Convo. I think that's a 3:30 start. There's a couple of games featuring Monroe Central for some reason being played at the Convo. I don't know why, but that could be a fun game to get to. Waverly at Guy Academy is one for me to look for. There's games at the Ironton Classic. South Webster plays there. There's a lot of games at Logan. Look around for different schedules. Warren has a classic on Friday and Saturday. Not very close to most of the people in our area, but the TVC people that may have been started to watch. Those are some games you might want to get over and watch. And Monday, since we do our show on Mondays, Unioto at Circleville could be interesting. Logan Elm at Fairfield Union also could be one to watch for as well, because I think Logan Elm has gotten off to a dreadful start record wise, but they've been in pretty much every one of these games.
We should have streamed that Eastern and West game. It's too late now, I think. That'd be a quick turnaround.
That would be a quick turnaround.
That should be a good game, though. I think you'll enjoy that one if you decide to go down there.
Yeah, and yeah, should be a good one for sure. So we only got one girls game to recap here, and we don't have a whole lot of info on it, but it's one of the better wins in the area in a long time. Was Portsmouth 42, George Rogers Clark out of Kentucky, the Lexington area 41. George Rogers Clark finished last year rated as the number 2 team on Max Reps in all of Kentucky. They did not win the state championship last year. They lost, I believe, in the Sweet 16 to the team that won it, but it was a very good win. Sienna Allen scores with no time left, split a pair of free throws, which to me, like I told you off air, but you get fouled, two-shot fouled, no time left. And, you know, no time left, two shots, tie game. It's not a ton of pressure because you have two shots to do it. But here's the thing, Sienna Allen missed the first one. So then your pressure level goes from kind of minimal to out of this world because then it's going to be a possibility of, choking or just not coming through in the clutch. Sienna Allen sinks the second one to win the game for the Trojans. They moved to 7-0 with the win. Sienna Allen led them with 15 points. Daisha Reed, 8 points, or points, as I spelled it wrong on here. 8 rebounds, 4 assists for the senior. As I mentioned, Trojans are 7-0, wins over George Rogers Clark, Springfield, the Laurel School in the non-conference. They've really upped that non-conference schedule to get them ready for a big one coming up this week. A couple other games, I had originally on here Minford over Tays Valley, but we kind of talked about it earlier. Piketon over Adena was kind of an upset in a way that I covered earlier last week or later last week. It was a 33-31 game. You can read the story on the SOSA Ohio website. So in that one, I was pretty impressed. There's just some of the things that Piketon was able to do. You can tell they're growing as a team. Layla Kelly kind of makes them go. Jalen Forbes is another one that's really important for them. Danny Ritchie made a couple. She only had 4 points, but had them late. Reese Shanks is a sophomore that comes off the bench, gives them some really good minutes. Hayden Daniels, Aberil Johnson does some. They just do some little things like they are going to get better and better throughout the year. They had a kind of a head scratcher loss to Miami Trace last week, early in the week. Not that they lost to Miami Trace, it was the way they lost. It was like a 30-point game. I was very confused. I thought that was gonna be a really good game. It ended up, clearly not being. So, Piketon's a team that I think is going to be maybe a sleeper later in the tournament, but man, they have a lot of sophomores that have some talent, a couple good seniors as well, so they're gonna be one to watch for. Another game, just kinda just throwing out overall, like, recap wise, if you want to look on, sosohio.com, Derek and Brock had some pictures and the rundown of the Eastern Brown
Yeah,
and West
West
Union
Union.
game, which we threw it ended up being a pick because one of the games got
Yeah,
canceled.
Minford and Sims Valley.
Yeah, so your boy got that one right. But you know, I think that was one where Eastern Brown came in. We weren't really sure how they're going to be. They end up winning that game pretty significantly. So they may be a team to watch for in the Shack, even though they lost later in the week to North Adams. The Shack this year is kind of all over the place. They're not really sure on that. So next, if you want to get into our team of the week.
Yep. So our team of the week on the girls' side is Fairfield Union, right? Obviously, really good year a couple of years ago, district runner-ups to a Fairland team that went on to the Final Four. That was, I believe, their first year in Division Two.
Mhm.
Obviously, now the divisions have been massively rearranged. A bit of a down year last year, but now off to a 7-0 start. You have Christian Thompson back, formerly the commit to OU for volleyball, now committed to Ohio State for track and
That's
field.
all
So
right.
it's not too often you get two different signing days for two different sports, both at the Division One level. So obviously a great athlete for the Falcons, and a big week for them last week. They go 3-0 on the week, wins over Licking Valley, Tays Valley, and Waverly. I think Christian Thompson just, with the kind of athlete she is, when you have an athlete to the degree that has the ability that she does, just going to give you an advantage on the floor at all times.
Yeah, and she can, even though she's 6 foot tall, she also can handle the ball. She can get you set up into your offense. She does a really good job of pretty much everything. That Waverly team's like sneaky good, and they beat them 83-49. Like just an absolute as we've said before, taking them behind the woodshed, just absolute destruction there by that Fairfield Union team, and that really is what stood out to me. They went 8-16 last year, 7-0 already this year. 22 points on Saturday from Christian Thompson, Macy Martindale with 15, Jill Cooper Ryder with 13. They're a Fairfield Union team that is they're traditionally they're used to winning, and they had a step back last year, but it looks like they did that step back just to leap forward this year. The mix of Thompson, Martindale, Cooper Ryder, Taylor Schmeck, who plays really good defense, Alexis Leith also give the Falcons a nice mix of size and athleticism. Toss fits for their opponents this year. They have a big one on Tuesday at Hamilton Township. Hamilton Township just played a really tight one with a now 5-1 Circleville team. It
Yep.
was a 2-point game there, so that one should be tough on Tuesday. And then at home on Saturday, which ironically leads into our previews.
Yep. So our previews for the girls segment, a big one, Circleville at Fairfield Union. As John mentioned, this one is on Saturday. Circleville, obviously an undefeated regular season a year ago, finally losing in the district final once again to a Fairland team. So Fairland back-to-back district title wins over MSL opponents. I think it was um, a very motivational season for
Yes.
a very motivationally driven year for a Circleville Tigers team that obviously Bigham does a great job over there. Really, I think gains the trust of his players and treats them as family almost. And I think family is a big word to kind of describe this Circleville team. Obviously, they rallied around the tragedy with Edgington a season ago, and you know miraculously she's been able to make her
Mm-hmm.
full recovery and come back. Caught the tail. I say the tail end, but I think she was back before the midway point of the volleyball
Mm-hmm.
season. So it seems like she's ready to roll for the basketball year. And obviously, last year one of the biggest and most impactful freshmen
Mm-hmm.
on the hardwood prior to her injury comes back as one of the most impactful sophomores in the coverage area. So Circleville, just one of those teams that you like to root for in the coverage area.
Yeah, they seem like it's a good group. Like you said, well coached group. It's a team that dealt with a lot of adversity last year and still got through that regular season undefeated. So, a great achievement a year ago. They did lose tonight to a really good Bishop Watterson team. I think it was 39-30. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So drops them to 5-1. So which maybe takes some pressure off. You get some pressure off and make it to where you're more likely to be able to focus on just the task at hand rather than that extended regular season win streak that they had. So you mentioned Addison Edgington. She had 11 points in their 33-31 win over Hamilton Township, 11 over Liberty Union, but 26 in their win over Logan Elm previously. Maddie Blakeman is another big player. Now, these are also underclassmen. So, Maddie Blakeman, 12 points in that win over Hamilton Township, 24 in that game against Liberty Union, 15 against Logan Elm. Those two you can expect to be in double figures each night. Brooklyn Kramer is another name you're going to hear a lot of, 13 against Liberty Union, 18 against Logan Elm. Then you have some really nice athletes you mix in there as well with Allie Thornsley, Ava Justice, Mallory McConnell, Kaylee West. You've got some really nice athletes over there for Coach Bigham to use and to get into the right places. They're a well-coached team. This is going to be an interesting matchup because, as we mentioned, Fairfield Union 7-0 after an 8-16 season a year ago. The year before, they make it to the district final level. Both of these teams expect to get there and make it maybe a step further this year with how their hot starts have been. I mentioned Christian Thompson, an outstanding athlete overall. Macy Martindale, Jill Cooper Ryder, Taylor Smack, they're a team. It should be a fun matchup. We'll see how they do on the matchup with Edgington, where they throw Thompson. Does Thompson maybe get deployed on Blakeman just to use that length to kind of slow her down? It's gonna be a nice, chess game to see how the coaches do this. It should be a fun matchup for sure. I think that is one to keep an eye on in the MSL. But if you don't, you have other options on Saturday as well, including McClain at
Yeah.
Hillsboro, a 12:30 start. Also, so technically you could get to both because I think as of now, The
They
game
are.
at Fairfield Union is at night. The other game that we're gonna talk about is also at night, but this one, McClain 8-1. Their only loss was to a really good Fayetteville team that's probably gonna run the shack this year as they kind of
Both
yeah, yeah,
conferences.
both conferences. They're gonna be on the small side, but they're gonna run the both
Good
sides.
for them. First year in the Southeast District too.
Yeah.
So
So
see what they do in the tournament as well.
so, McClain 8-1. Paisley Pryor, a sophomore, 17.7 points a game leads them. Anna Eikenberry, 13.2 points a game. Lara Henson, 7.5 points a game. Now she had 14 against Miami Trace to lead them in a big win for them there. Brenna Wright is another contributor, 4.5 points a game. So McLean is a team to watch for. I think you took Hillsboro preseason, right?
I did.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
took Hillsboro in the preseason. The other one you were thinking was this McLean team. So this is a big one as far as the FAC goes because Hillsboro now 7-1 because they added another win tonight. Dailey Davis has been unbelievable. Their only loss was to Western Brown, but every game so far, Dailey Davis has had a double double, including tonight. I think she had like 12 and 14 or 14 and 12, either way. But she's averaging 17.3 points, 13.6 rebounds a game. That's absurd. And she also gets steals. She does a little bit of everything for Hillsboro. 8 straight double doubles to start the season. Just an outstanding start for the sophomore, but she's not alone. Senior Peyton Bledsoe, 11 points a game. Kobe Miles, a junior, 9.4 points a game. Ella Jordan, a freshman, 10.4 points a game. Kyra Boyd, a junior, 9 points, 6.5 rebounds a game. I think this is a really interesting matchup. This is one where, if there wasn't other stuff, other things that we had going on that day, we would likely be there. Hopefully we can get there for the rematch later on,
Yeah.
but, I think we'll have someone there covering it for sure. Should be a big one. I would guess that we maybe see some pictures from Ray Ray at that one as well.
Could
So,
be back-to-back nights at Hillsboro for
yeah,
Raymond. So
yeah, it should be a fun one. I think this one is going to be one that I'm really interested to see. It seems like Hillsboro is been kind of a juggernaut so far. McLean had that really tough game with Waverly to where I think they're more, maybe they're still a year away. I think this Hillsborough team may be there already, which we'll talk about a little bit later in our picks as well. So that one's a big one on Saturday, but you got one more option.
yeah, another big one. Maybe the first of two. Like, I don't see how these matchups aren't the biggest girls matchups of the week. Each week they happen. They are getting flipped though. So the first matchup between the two teams a little bit earlier than it was last year.
Yeah, because it was
Um,
after New Year's last year.
yeah, and then now this year the game at Port. So it's Portsmouth at Fairland this Saturday. So that will most likely be the last game before Christmas break for both of them. So
Mhm.
obviously both teams looking to pick up a win headed into the break. But both teams, very well coached. Obviously, we mentioned John Buchanan currently sitting in third place all time, both boys and girls, just basketball head coaching wins at Fairland. And then, Amy Hughes and the experience she brings, not only as a coach, but as a former player to this Portsmouth team that we've been raving about for the last few years. We think this will be, the best opportunity for Portsmouth to date. I picked them in the preseason to win the OVC, but I did mention the championship, the league title in the Ohio Valley Conference, still going to run through Proctorville. You still have to go all the way down there. Obviously, it's a little bit of a shorter trip for them than it is for us, but you still got to go down to Proctorville along the river and pick up a win on the road against the Dragons. So a big one this weekend for the Trojans. They're off to a 7-0 start, 3-0 in league play. Big wins out of the league with wins over Laurel and most recently this past Saturday over George Rogers Clark. Obviously Cian Allen, Daisha Reed, Savannah Cantrell, kind of the names you remember from the past couple of years. But, Kiki Woods, Haven Carter, a couple players that have come on, as of late. Kiki Woods was really lighting up the scoreboard the first
Mhm.
couple of games. Um,
I think Bryce Shannon has played well
yeah,
for him
yeah,
as
Bryce
well.
Shannon is one of those players coming back as well. I believe KK Mays is
Yes.
another one for Coach Hughes. Now the Trojans are at Rock Hill Tuesday night. You kind of expect them to take care of business heading into Saturday. but a big one. You expect them to go into that matchup undefeated. The same can be said for Fairland. They're 6-0, one more league game for them, 4-0. They are taking on Gallia on Tuesday. So once again, you kind of expect them to head into Saturday undefeated. And it's been a lot of the same. Obviously, you graduate both Kylie Bruce and Bree Allen a season ago. Allen, the all-time leading scorer in the girls program for Fairland, but it's been a lot of the same for Bailey Russell. 22 and a half points per game, 47% from three-point range on 58 attempts for the junior. Cameron Barnett's averaging 15 and a half. Godby really close to a double-double with 11 points and 7 rebounds per game. Ava Lane, you mentioned her when we were always when we were recapping the
Yeah,
battle in the 7-4-0 stuff. Just a freshman averaging over 9 points per game, and then Issa Taliaferro, one of those players that has had a lot of experience over the last 2 years with back-to-back Final Four runs for this
mhm,
Fairland team, and she's been a big part of that each year. So this is kind of I can't think of a bigger matchup, especially within conference play on the girls' side in the coverage area. Obviously, Waterford and Fedhawk was a big one
right.
for the TVC Hawking, but Portsmouth and Fairland, this has been a very anticipated matchup, a very highly anticipated matchup the last couple of years, and you don't really see much change in here. So excited for this one on
Yeah,
Saturday.
you mentioned it, and what we saw last year, the first matchup, it felt like Fairland was almost intimidated by Portsmouth. Portsmouth wasn't scared at all. I think at that point it felt like a changing of the guard because it felt like Portsmouth, like they didn't care who they were playing. Like they was like they could play
Yep.
um, Caitlin Clark in Iowa, and they'd be like, "Ah, we're gonna beat you. Like we're gonna run you off the court. We're gonna go out and play. We're gonna compete." But they were fearless going into that game, and I think maybe at that point that wasn't something Fairland was used to. But the second time they played, Fairland completely dominated the game, and it was like whatever happened at Portsmouth completely woke Fairland up. And, I think they carried it on through, and they get to that state semifinal, they lose by a point, a heartbreaker up there, over in Dayton. But for Fairland, I think that they are awakened. They are really well coached. Obviously Portsmouth is as well, but I think this is a Fairland team that they do what they do better than pretty much anyone else does. So they're going to come into this game. They're going to want to protect their home court. They shoot the lights out. Barnett shoots it really well as well. I think you said it was like 38%, something like that, to go along with Russell shooting 47% from three. So
Yeah.
if to me the big difference between some of the schools they played is like Portsmouth can throw some people out at them that can maybe slow down Russell on the outside. They maybe can slow down the dribble drive to where they don't have to help so much to where Russell isn't able to just have her feet set and shoot. But Russell has grown as a player and can score in a variety of different ways now as well. So you have Barnett's that can do it on the drive, but also shoot from three. Godby can do it anywhere. Is one of like to me one of the more entertaining players to watch just because it's such a mature game that she has as well. So I think Ava Lane's going to have to play big minutes in this one. Telefaro is going to have to score a little bit more for them. I think Tegan Leap did a good job the other day. If she can play big minutes and give them some positive outcomes in this one, I think will be something to watch. But this one should be well worth the price of admission. I think more than likely Fairland will be streaming it as well. So,
Yep. Yep.
um, I think that's definitely gonna be worth watching. And, if you can't make it out, I think if they keep it at Saturday night, I think it's worth throwing it on the computer screen as you have the football game on as well. So, it should be a really good Saturday night. And that's, we mentioned, we didn't say we didn't make picks because these are the games that, partially of what we're gonna pick. So gonna be some big ones. So Saturday, some really big games. We got one on Wednesday that we're gonna talk about in our picks, and then one for next Monday. So we may not even know when we do the show next Monday exactly what our up to date standings are. because we got a big one next Monday that we'll talk about. But yeah, so our quick picks moving on will
Wait,
be
say that. So one of these games is next Monday.
yeah, Athens at Waterford.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
got you then.
but I'm sure it'll probably be done by like if we're on it our normal.
Yeah, maybe Carson will be down there. We can get
Yeah.
up to date stuff on that. So
Yeah, hopefully. So although he's going to be in
will he be out of town?
well, he's probably going to be in Chillicothe because we're probably not going to be in Athens.
Ah, well, he'll still whatever. He can still
Yeah.
go down.
Someone needs to because that's a big one. That's two undefeated teams playing, so that'll be a big one for sure. So our first and our quick pick five, as we mentioned, we talked about earlier, Circleville at Fairfield Union. I have no idea on this because I think with Circleville, they are very seasoned in what they have. They returned some key players. For Fairfield Union, they're riding a high right now. I think Coach Bigham can do some things that maybe will keep them in this game a little bit better than what Fairfield Union saw on Saturday or what they've seen previously. I just kind of look at the Fairfield Union and Taze Valley score, and I don't like that. Just kind of threw me off a little bit because like how dominating they've been in some of these games, and that game was a little bit closer than what I would have expected with how Fairfield Union's been playing. But I'm going to take Circleville in this. I think it's going to be a really tight game. I think Circleville's maybe basketball experience will take them over the edge in this one, even though what Thompson can do, what Martindale can do, I think is going to keep Fairfield Union in a lot of games, and they're going to win a lot of games. But ultimately, I'm going to take Circleville in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the common opponents up to this point. Bloom Carroll and Amanda Clear Creek, two of the big ones. Both teams victorious over those two teams. But, against Bloom Carroll for Fairfield Union, it was a 21-point win, only 10 for Circleville.
Mm,
Now, when you start to get into double digits, I think that gets a little funny because
right.
some teams call the dogs off. Now, against Amanda Clear Creek, just a 5-point win for Fairfield Union, a 13-point win for Circleville. So, when you look at the common opponents, I don't think that does a whole lot for you. Um, man, I haven't seen Fairfield Union. Obviously, they had the big win over Waverly this past week. Now, Fairfield Union is set to play Hamilton Township Tuesday night. I think that score will. I wish I had that score.
Right.
I wish I had that score already. I think that would help a lot. Um, man, I think Green beat Sims Valley by
Yeah.
27. Um, but yeah, I think Fairfield Union obviously
Well, Nap
has.
only she almost had a triple double.
I think Fairfield Union in this game will have, and in most games, probably the best athlete on the floor. But it's a Circleville team that a lot of these girls played volleyball as well. And in volleyball, Fairfield Union had the best player on the floor, and that was no problem for Circle. I think Circleville plays really well as a team.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've mentioned Bigham does a really good job. I think this is a toss up, but where's this game at? It's
At Fairfield
it's
Union.
at Fairfield Union. Mm, I think I'm gonna roll. I think I'm gonna go with Circleville for now. I think
Okay.
that's probably the safer pick between the two.
Prepare for us to be wrong. So I was very wrong on picking
I'm surprised you
against
picked against Fairfield
yeah.
Union again.
So our second game will be McClain at Hillsboro. I this one I think with Paisley Pryor against Tyler Davis, the sophomore matchup is going to be really really interesting to see how those two can carry their teams and elevate them. Ultimately, in our preview, I think I was kind of obviously leaning more Hillsboro.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they have such a mix of what they get at each grade level. So like with L Jordan and Kobe Miles mixed in with what Tylee Davis and Peyton Bledsoe can do. I know with like Anna Eichenberry, they're getting some really good as a secondary scorer for McClain. I just think the depth of Hillsborough ultimately is going to be what's going to take them over the top in this one and give them one game lead in the FAC.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to pick the same as you again, but I don't think we're gonna do any of these where I pick against Hillsboro, especially in league play. It's called quick picks for a reason. I'm gonna roll with the Indians here.
And the next one that it's a non-league game on Wednesday. We went out of our way last year. Like last year, we went
I think it was fourth.
3 or 4 games where we just went where we weren't. covering it in any way. Like, we just kind of just went to watch
I
these
know
games.
3 off the top of my head. We
It was
went Waverly Jackson, Green Huntington, and then Unioto Westfall
yeah,
Boys. I'm
th
not sure if there's another one or
there
not,
may have
but
been
for sure
more.
3 we went
Yeah.
to.
So, yeah, this was one of the ones last year we wanted to get eyes on Abby Knapp to see what she could do. Tonight, 30 points, 12 rebounds, 7 blocks. Like, she is just such a game changer for Green. I'm guessing that she will be at 1,000 points by the end of
Actually, she had 30 points, 12 points, and 7 blocks,
close, yeah.
according to the Twitter.
Boy, I'm glad I don't do that because I
No,
like,
it's a lot.
yeah.
It's a lot.
So, yeah, Abby Knapp is just she's one of the top players in our area. The big thing, though, for Huntington is they do have, Braley Hosworth can be
Yep.
maybe the size and athleticism to kinda counteract that, where last year, it was a pretty decisive
It
win
was
for
like
Hunting
52-25 or something like
Yeah,
that. I'm not sure if it was that much, but it was a 15, 20-point win for Huntington at home.
but Green this year, I believe, undefeated still,
Yes.
and they have just absolutely rolled in their games. Huntington, I think, has played some games that are a little bit closer than what to be expected, but they also have an outstanding scorer in Allie Baker. Allie Baker just she can really fill it up. I think Tori Smith does a really good job running the show for them, and I think they're both well coached teams. I think Coach Jurg does a great job. He does a great job sitting in the seat on the Coaches Call-In show live Friday nights here at the downtown studio. So make sure you tune in for that. For Huntington, though, I think you know what? I'm gonna take the team in green.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Bobcats. I'm gonna take them to protect their home court. I think Abby Knapp has a monster game in this, and I think she gets a little bit more help than she got last year in that matchup. I think they're a little more mature team as they've gone on this year, but I think this was has the chance to be a sneaky, really good game.
Yeah, I mean, you kinda nailed it, right? Like, it's a green team that, um, it's a lot of the same players from last year. It's just they're a year older, right? So you have Hayslip and then Knapp,
Mhm.
and, Abrams as well as a junior. My only thing with Green is that, you're averaging about 53 points per game and you're getting 40 of those from 2 players, right? And you're getting 28 of those from just Knapp alone. And
Where Huntington could probably throw has the athletes that you
right.
can probably throw them out to try to slow that down.
And I know last year was last year and this year is this year, but I mean, I just feel like a 20-point loss in most cases is hard to make up in 1 year. I'm gonna go with Huntington.
Mhm.
I think Uric does a really good job. I think you mentioned he was in here. I think you mentioned
Him
the
and it
show, but
yeah,
him
him.
and Allie Baker were in here last Friday to kick off the Haynes Total Healthcare Coaches Call-In show.
Make sure you
Um,
take a look at that also. That's also on our live.
yeah, I think he does a really good job over there. Obviously, they've had a lot of talent on the hardwood the last handful of years. I believe it was what was the girl's name? Hit the buzzer beater against Paint Valley. Um, it's Emma. Oh man,
Henshaw.
yeah, Henshaw hit that shot against Paint Valley. I think it was like a. I think it was like a less than 30. I don't think they got over 30 points in the
It
game.
might
It
have
was like
been like
28, 27 or
yeah.
something, but it was a really entertaining game. But yeah, I'm gonna roll with the Lady Huntsman here for our third game.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that. I think that one's like for me, I think Green maybe slightly a reach, but I think Knapp has the big game in that one. But should be fun. I think that one's gonna be one, like I said, has a chance to be sneaky good. Then speaking of one that has a chance to be sneaky good, Athens at Waterford. That one's gonna be a huge difference in division size on this. I think previously I may have looked at this as just gone, this is gonna be an Athens win because that's such a big difference. But Waterford just beat a really good Unioto team on a neutral site. And this one, Athens has to go to Waterford next Monday. Waterford, the Wildcats, they've been to state a variety of times for a reason. They are a really well coached team. They, you have a Division One player, you have a Division 3 player, you have a variety of just really good athletes. Wagner's going to be the best player on the court. Now, when we mention athletes, the athletes that Athens have are outstanding. You know, they have one senior in Holcomb. It's gonna be I think it's gonna be a fun matchup. Ultimately, I'm gonna go with Waterford at home, but I do think this is once again has a chance to be a really sneaky good game. It's a Monday game right before Christmas. A lot of green involved in this one as
Couple
well.
big green games here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take the Wildcats.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it straight. I don't know a whole lot about either team, right? These are TVC teams, just kind of starting to creep into that TVC coverage era of Southern Ohio Sports Authority. Obviously, Athens with their first TVC Ohio Conference win last year in a few handful of years. I don't know the
Mm,
exact number. I just remember Carson had mentioned it, maybe like 2017 or 16, somewhere in that time frame. But it's been a little while since they've been at the top of the conference. Now back into the spotlight. Like I said, I don't know much about Waterford. I do know one thing: they win games, and I think that's going to continue here. I think the win against a team I'm a little bit more familiar with, and Unioto is a lot is
mm.
very telling to me. So I'm going to roll with the Wildcats here.
Yeah, and then our last one will be Portsmouth at Fairland. I don't know if you could tell with how I was talking. It was kinda like, this Fairland team at home. I'm gonna
Yeah,
take Fairland. Like,
yeah, no, I get it.
I think it's because, at home, I think they're gonna be fired up. I think they're going to want to protect their home court. They've heard for a long time how talented this Portsmouth team is, which it's very, very, very talented for sure. We're having stuff fall apart here, but very talented group in Portsmouth. It wouldn't surprise me if Portsmouth wins by double digits. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But ultimately, I'm going to take Fairland, even though Portsmouth has played a couple of really tight games, and I like that part of it is that they've had to grind their way through a couple wins. The win over George Rogers Clark, the win over the Laurel School. They had to grind their way through those games. But ultimately, I'm going to take Fairland in a tight one at home.
Yeah, I picked Portsmouth in both matchups last year. I think I'm going to do it again this
I can
year.
blame you.
You mentioned Fairland would be fired up. I think Portsmouth same way, right? I think not from us, and I'm not really sure from anybody, but it wouldn't surprise me if they've been hearing, a lot of "You can't win at Fairland. You just can't get it done in Proctorville."
Because when
And
you like, because it will have been years since Portsmouth won at
right,
Fairlawn.
last year I think was the first year they had beat Fairland since both teams have been in the
Mhm,
OVC, and they snapped that really long conference winning streak of the Dragons. So I think it was up to like 43, 44
mhm,
games up to that point. And it was like an 18 or 19 game winning streak for Fairland over Portsmouth.
mhm.
So I'm going to roll with the Trojans here. I got to make up some ground in the standings, so I'm going to go against you every chance I get. So, but I think I would have picked Portsmouth even if I was picking first anyway. So, yeah, I'm going to roll with the Trojans here.
Yeah, that one's exciting. I hope that it gets moved earlier and, like, moved to Chillicothe. It's such a long trip. So, definitely I'll be tuning in on their live stream over
Even
there
if
at
they just played it at like Shawnee or
yeah, go
something,
back to Shawnee.
well, I guess that'd be more of a
Right.
home floor advantage
Go Jackson.
for Portsmouth to go meet somewhere in the middle that's also within driving distance of us because Proctorville is close to 2 hours away, and I'm not
Yeah.
doing that on a Saturday. So
Yeah. So, yeah, should be some fun games on Saturday. Also, that Huntington Green game on Wednesday, and then Athens at Waterford on Monday. So, some really good matchups in there. Some other games to watch for coming up Tuesday. I think Ironton at South Point has a chance to be an interesting game, probably for third place in the OVC. Actually, it's for a minimum of third. It's not going to be for first or second, but these are two teams that I think have the ability to make this possibly a fun game. Wednesday, Washington at Zane Trace, Paint Valley at New Boston, some teams that maybe struggle to get some wins. I do think that this Zane Trace team is playing better. They played Adina to a 9 point game on Saturday, so I think they're one to watch for. Paint Valley has struggled this year, but they've got a couple pieces in Stauffer and Dye that can make this game interesting over there in Glenwood. As we mentioned, Huntington at Green, and then Adina at McClain. I think that's going to be one that we're gonna have eyes on for sure because that's a McLean team. I oh yeah, we will have eyes on it, won't we? Well, not for sure, but
yeah, we're thinking if you're still sticking around, we think Adina at McLean might be one we get to. Yeah, I think that could be a good non-conference game. That was actually, I believe, the first game I ever wrote for by myself because I was with you at that Unioto game. I think it was Adina at, and that was when Adina was really really
yeah,
good. And they took down or excuse me, I think McLean ended up winning that night, but Yeah, it'll be nice to get back over to the School of Beauty, and
Yeah.
maybe if everything goes well, we can get over there for that rematch with Hillsboro down the stretch in the FAC, depending on how that first matchup between the
Mhm.
two go. I believe on Friday is when that one is, or is that one of the Saturday games? I know.
Saturday. That's
Okay,
Saturday, 12:30.
okay.
Yeah.
So
So then we've got Thursday. This one, TVC hockey, big one. Belpre at Waterford. Belpre also knocked off Fed Hawk. So if you beat that Federal Hawking team, you're a pretty good team. So this is one to watch for. I know Belpre has some up and coming talent as well. Now Waterford probably a heavy favorite in all of their TVC Hawking games from here on out, but this one has one. Just keep your eye on it. And then the opener of the Ironton Classic on Friday will be Notre Dame at Ironton. Notre Dame still unbeaten. Then we got Federal Hawking at Warren, which is at the Warren Classic. I believe that's the semi-main event on that first night. On Saturday, you got West at Ironton, Belpre at Fort Fry. That one's got a chance to be big with some tournament implications on that. Minford at Marietta, I think, is one to watch for, as Minford seems to be playing pretty well right now. Marietta has been a nice program for a long time over there in Washington County. And then Monday, Athens at Waterford, and then Harvest Prep at Federal Hawking as well. So that should be a interesting one, just to kind of see where Federal Hawking is. Harvest Prep was a team that lost by double digits to Fairland early. See if Fed Hawk can hang with them, and they would be maybe one of the teams to pick in Division 6 because, I'll be honest, Division 6 not great outside of really Fed Hawk in this area. So, yeah, so those are the games to watch for, and that's what we got this week.
all right, that'll wrap it up. Longer episode this week. After next week, well, actually, after this episode going into the next week, we won't have to preview or recap a 12-game slate.
Yes.
That takes up about 30 minutes to an hour. So back to regularly scheduled programming next
And we
week.
might get to ruin some Christmases with the Convo or Con No next week.
We're doing it. We're doing the
Yeah.
combo or con no. We'll do it for, I don't think we have enough teams in divisions 1, 2. We might have enough in 3. But definitely divisions 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll roll through and do a little convo, con no
Maybe we
action.
do like
So
a couple divisions one week and then a couple another.
we can do that
Yeah.
because those might take a little while if we
Mhm.
jump in depth into a few teams.
Right.
But
So, yeah, I think, hopefully you stuck around at this point. If you didn't, I don't blame you. But there's some teams, some of the really good teams as well. You're not going to hear about over the next few days because they don't play. Like North Adams boys off for 10 days, Unioto girls off for 2 weeks until they play again. So, I mean, those are some of the top teams in there each side. Not going to hear about them for, a little bit, but you will soon after that because I think we'll have them both on live stream pretty quickly after the new year. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. I think we might be taking in some other classic games, shorter classics, maybe not a 12 gamer, coming up after Christmas. So keep your eyes open for that as well. So we appreciate you sticking with us. If you got through that long battle for the 740 spiel from us, we appreciate it. We appreciate, once again, all the help we got down at the Battle of the 740. Seth Pluka,
Chef Pluta, come
Pluta,
on,
it's been 2 hours of this, so, and
pretty
his staff at
close.
Shawnee State were great. Jim Barry, his group really were helpful for us as well. All the coaches and players really battled down there in the 740. And then, like we said, Malachi Roselle, Kenneth Hay did a great job on their calls as well. Dewey did a great job on his calls. I did a fantastic job on 12 games. There was one where I was watching it back, I was like, I was tired. But yeah, so we appreciate you tuning in. If you want to go back and watch any of those games, once again, on the live ticker on here, check those out. Coach's Call-In show every Friday night, live here from the downtown studio. Check out sosohire.com for all of these games. Check out the Derek, Brock, Carson on X, the Everything app with game previews, game updates, and whatnot. I'll have some, and then check out the Overtime Twitter account to
Yep.
see where we're going to be next.
Have some quick pick graphics.
Yeah,
put up
quick
on
pick
there,
graphics
so,
coming out. Thanks to Views Gymnasium as
I
well.
know.
So also Perfection One, as always, our main sponsor for Overtime. We appreciate them. They've got places in Pickaway, Pike, and Ross County. So
Yeah.
hopefully you can check them out because you got like a little ding and not like meeting by accident or
Icy
highly
roads.
recommended.
Icy roads.
Yeah,
Not
icy
too
roads.
far
Be
away.
careful.
So
With some of these games, like we talked about, like, go watch these games. They're really far away. Like P. Floyd he came down on Saturday, watched 7 games, didn't go back on Sunday because he counted like 12 deer on the way back to Logan. So be
mhm.
careful out there. There's a lot of deer running for their lives literally right now. Also, icy roads coming up. It's just yeah.
All right, long episode. Hopefully not too bad next week, but couple games we're going to stream this week. Like John said, coach's call-in show this Friday night. So that'll wrap it up for this week's episode of SOSA Overtime, presented by Perfection One.